That woman does not belong in this hearing.
Everyone watched the wrong woman. Leonard noticed the box.
How is that box here?
Naomi stayed perfectly still.
I did not come here for myself.
A red seal waited.
Please let the record speak.
And the moment Leonard saw that red seal, his practiced calm disappeared.
That seal was never supposed to surface.
Arthur sat trapped in silence.
I am still here.
His mind was still awake.
I understand what is happening.
Leonard controlled every word.
He cannot manage these decisions anymore.
He turned illness into weakness.
My uncle needs someone to protect him.
He called Naomi dangerous.
She is using his condition to get close to his money.
He still has the right to be heard.
She came to restore his voice.
The seal will be examined.
And its secret began 3 days earlier. The seal mattered because Arthur had tried to tell Naomi about it 3 days before the hearing, when everyone around him had already decided that his broken speech meant a broken mind. He was sitting in a rehabilitation room at St. Agnes Medical Center, his right hand resting weakly against a laminated communication board. The board contained simple pictures meant to help him choose water, food, pain medicine, rest, and family. Leonard had approved it because it made Arthur look helpless. It reduced a man who had built one of the largest manufacturing companies in the state to a row of small drawings that other people could interpret for him. But Arthur did not point to water. He did not point to home. He did not point to Leonard, even though Leonard had been standing nearby with the patient patience of a man performing concern for an audience. Arthur kept pressing one unremarkable image near the bottom of the board, a small brass lantern. The nurses assumed he wanted the bedside light adjusted. Leonard assumed he was confused. Naomi understood that Arthur was trying to reach a place that had been designed for exactly this moment. For nearly 40 years, Wren Meridian Industries had been known as Arthur Wren's Company. It had begun with a single machine shop on the eastern edge of the city and grown into a national manufacturer of building systems, public transit equipment, and low-cost modular housing. Arthur had become wealthy, but the company's most important story was never its market value. Its story was the people who had stayed when business was difficult. Welders, machinists, warehouse workers, clerks, maintenance crews, and families who could trace 3 generations of steady work back to the same factory gates. Arthur liked to say that a company was not a monument to the person who founded it. It was a promise made to the people whose hands kept it standing. He had put that belief into practice in ways that irritated investors and inspired employees. Wren Meridian maintained a housing division that built durable apartments for working families. It funded scholarships for trade students. It kept a medical assistance program for retired employees long after accountants argued that the expense no longer made business sense. Those choices were not sentimental accidents. Arthur had seen what happened when executives treated workers as numbers in a report. His own father had lost a job during a factory consolidation when Arthur was young, and the memory had stayed with him. Success, he believed, meant little if it required people who had given their lives to a business to become disposable the moment they became inconvenient. Leonard Hale had never shared that belief. He was Arthur's sister's son, and from the beginning, he had learned how to make ambition look like devotion. Leonard had joined the company 15 years earlier, after an impressive career in consulting. He understood market language, shareholder pressure, acquisition strategy, and the polished way successful people could turn a selfish proposal into a speech about the future. He could make a layoff sound like a rescue plan. He could make the sale of a neighborhood look like innovation. He could sit beside a worried employee, lower his voice, touch their shoulder, and leave them feeling that they had been heard, even while he prepared to do the opposite of what they needed. Arthur had noticed Leonard's talent long before he recognized the danger beneath it. He made his nephew chief operating officer because the company was changing and because he believed younger leadership needed room to grow. Leonard rewarded that trust by becoming indispensable. He learned every division, befriended board members, cultivated bankers, and placed loyal executives in positions where they could control the flow of information. By the time Arthur began asking difficult questions about certain transactions, Leonard had already built a circle around himself. The conflict between them had started quietly. Leonard wanted to sell Ren Meridian's housing division to a private investment group called Horizon Vale Partners. The sale would be described as a strategic restructuring. Investors would receive a large immediate return. Ren Meridian would become leaner, more profitable, and easier to reposition for a future public offering. Leonard spoke about the proposal as though it were the only rational answer to a changing economy. Arthur saw something else. He saw rents rising, workers being pushed farther from their jobs, and an entire mission being handed to people who had never cared about it. He knew Horizon Vale had a record of buying affordable properties, cutting maintenance, raising fees, and selling them again when the numbers improved. He also knew that once the division was gone, it would never return. For 2 years, Arthur refused to approve the sale. He delayed meetings, requested independent reviews, and kept his voting shares locked behind a trust structure that made a quick takeover difficult. Leonard smiled through every disagreement. In public, he praised his uncle's wisdom. In private, he began preparing for the day Arthur could no longer stand in his way. That day appeared to arrive on a cold Sunday morning in early March, when Arthur suffered a stroke. The stroke did not take his memory. It did not erase his judgment. It damaged the part of his brain that helped turn thoughts into spoken language. The doctors explained that he had aphasia, a condition that could make it painfully difficult to find words, form sentences, read quickly, or answer questions under pressure. To anyone willing to slow down, use written choices, allow time, and listen beyond speech, Arthur remained unmistakably himself. He recognized people. He understood documents. He reacted strongly to business news. He could point to figures, write fragments, and signal agreement or refusal with remarkable precision. But aphasia was a condition Leonard could exploit because it was easy to misunderstand. When Arthur struggled to answer a question in the hospital, Leonard would gently explain that his uncle had become confused. When Arthur tried to push away papers, Leonard would say he was agitated. When Arthur stared at a visitor with anger because he could not express what he wanted, Leonard would tell the visitor that the stroke had changed him. The people around Arthur were not cruel. Most were simply busy, worried, and unfamiliar with the difference between a person who cannot communicate in the usual way and a person who cannot think. Leonard made that confusion useful. Within days, he arranged for himself to control Arthur's schedule. Visitors had to be approved through Leonard's office. Phone calls were screened. Longtime employees who came to see Arthur were told that he needed quiet. Board members received carefully edited medical summaries. Even Arthur's home staff were warned that too much stimulation could endanger his recovery. Every restriction sounded reasonable in isolation. Together, they formed a wall. Naomi Reed saw the wall before anyone else did. She had not been a senior executive at Ren Meridian. She had never attended shareholder dinners, or appeared in annual reports. For most of her career, Naomi had worked in the Records and Preservation Department, a small office in the oldest building on the company campus. Her work involved minutes from board meetings, trust amendments, land deeds, historical contracts, environmental reports, employee pension records, and the delicate task of deciding what should be protected when everyone else wanted more space. It was work that made powerful people impatient. They wanted files quickly. They wanted old disputes forgotten. They wanted signatures without context and summaries without inconvenient attachments. Naomi had learned that the most important document in a room was often the one someone called outdated. She had come to Ren Meridian in her 20s after her father injured his back at the factory and could no longer work steady shifts. Her father had been proud of the company even when it failed him. He kept a photograph of Arthur shaking hands with a line of welders after a contract victory, and he told Naomi that men like Arthur were rare because they still remembered the names of people who worked below them. Naomi did not romanticize the company. She knew its history included mistakes, layoffs, and decisions that hurt people. But she also knew Arthur and his late wife, Beatrice, had spent decades trying to build safeguards against the kind of greed that could erase a company's conscience in a single board meeting. Beatrice had been the first person at Ren Meridian to treat Naomi's work as something more than storage. She had a scholar's mind and a practical understanding of human weakness. She believed that people often behaved honorably when circumstances were easy, but true character appeared when money, illness, inheritance, and fear entered the same room. Years before Arthur's stroke, Beatrice had begun building a separate system for critical records. She called it the Lantern Archive because, in her words, hidden things should have a light kept for them. The archive was not a secret fortune or a private collection of gossip. It contained certified copies of documents that could matter if family pressure, corporate pressure, or medical crisis ever placed Arthur's intentions at risk. Arthur agreed because he understood what Beatrice was protecting. He had seen families tear themselves apart over a will. He had seen elderly founders surrounded by advisors who suddenly became experts on what was best for them. He had seen how quickly a person's own wishes could disappear once people decided that age, illness, or slow speech made those wishes inconvenient. The Lantern Archive was lodged not in Ren Meridian's offices, but in the county's restricted records repository. The company kept reference copies, but the certified originals were stored under a protocol requiring a court order, an independent records officer, and a documented chain of custody. Naomi had helped organize the material, but she could not open it alone. No one could. That was the point. Leonard knew the archive existed. Naomi was certain of it. He had attended the meeting years earlier, when the capacity safeguards were discussed, although he had acted bored at the time. He had called them overly cautious and expensive. Beatrice had smiled politely, then asked that his objection be entered into the minutes. After Arthur's stroke, the first sign that Leonard was moving against Naomi came quietly. 2 folders vanished from the company records room. They were not dramatic files. One contained old board resolutions related to Arthur's voting shares. The other held correspondence about the Lantern Archive. Naomi noticed because she knew every box number and accession date. When she asked the new compliance manager about the missing folders, she was told that Leonard had ordered a document review. 3 days later, Naomi was informed that her position had been eliminated in a restructuring. The letter was efficient and cold. It praised her long service, offered a severance package, and required her to return all company property. It also contained a warning that unauthorized retention or disclosure of internal materials could lead to legal action. Naomi understood the message beneath the formal language. Leonard was not simply removing her from payroll. He was making sure that if she spoke up, people would assume she had stolen something. She went home that afternoon carrying an empty cardboard box. In the box were a framed photograph of her father, a small brass paperweight shaped like a lantern, and a note Beatrice had written years earlier after Naomi stayed late to recover a damaged pension ledger. The note thanked her for believing that records were a form of respect. For 2 weeks, Naomi did nothing, not because she did not care, but because she knew that rushing toward a man like Leonard would only give him the story he wanted. He needed her to appear emotional, resentful, and unstable. He needed the court to see a dismissed employee rather than a witness to something larger. Then Arthur's old driver called her from a number she did not recognize. The driver had worked for Arthur for 27 years. He sounded frightened. Leonard had reassigned him, but he had seen Arthur during a transfer between appointments. Arthur had struggled to hold a notepad. On it, he had drawn a rectangle, a red circle, and a small lantern. The driver did not understand, but he remembered Naomi had once spoken about old company records. He thought she might. Naomi understood immediately. The rectangle was a document box. The red circle was a seal. The lantern was the archive. She contacted Daniel Park, the attorney the probate court had appointed to represent Arthur's interests in the guardianship case. Daniel was not Leonard's lawyer and not Naomi's ally. He was a careful attorney with a reputation for taking difficult cases seriously. But when Naomi first called, he sounded tired. He had already reviewed the medical report from Dr. Martin Vale, a respected neurologist, who concluded that Arthur could not make complex decisions. He had also listened to Leonard's account of a confused old man being manipulated by a former employee. Daniel agreed to meet Naomi only because Arthur's driver had independently confirmed the strange drawing. Naomi did not try to impress him. She did not pretend to have answers she did not possess. She placed copies of her employment records, the severance letter, the archive protocol, and a timeline of missing files on the table between them. She explained what aphasia was. She explained why a hurried verbal examination could not determine whether Arthur understood financial decisions. And she explained that the Lantern Archive might contain documents relevant to any attempt to take control of Arthur's property. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked the question Leonard had wanted everyone to ask. Why should anyone believe a fired records employee over a nephew, a doctor, and a board of directors? Naomi answered that they should not believe her because she was fired. They should verify the record because the record either existed or it did not. That answer changed something. Daniel checked the county repository. The Lantern Archive was real. Its access conditions were real. And most importantly, a limited request for emergency guardianship had been filed by Leonard only 48 hours after the first scheduled board discussion of the Horizon Vale sale. The timing did not prove wrongdoing, but it made the request impossible to ignore. The guardianship petition was written to sound compassionate. It described Arthur as vulnerable, confused, and unable to understand the consequences of business decisions. It argued that without a responsible family member in charge, Arthur's health and assets could be endangered. Leonard offered himself as the obvious solution. He claimed he had no conflict of interest because he sought no personal gain and only wished to preserve the company his uncle loved. What the petition did not mention was the vote. Arthur's shares represented enough voting power to block the sale of the housing division. If a guardian controlled those shares, the board could approve the deal. If the deal went through, Horizon Vale would pay advisory fees to several outside firms. One of those firms, according to a thin thread Daniel found in public business filings, was connected to a company called Northwatch Strategies. Northwatch Strategies had been formed 6 months earlier by Leonard's former college roommate. It had no public website, no employees listed beyond a mailing address, and no history of major consulting work. Yet it had suddenly been named as a strategic transition advisor in preliminary documents related to the potential sale. Daniel did not accuse Leonard immediately. He knew better. A suspicious company was not proof. A coincidence was not proof. But the pattern was beginning to form. The day before the probate hearing, Daniel petitioned Judge Imani Cole for authority to inspect the Lantern Archive under the court's supervision. Leonard objected through his counsel, arguing that old documents would only distract from Arthur's present medical condition. He also claimed that Naomi had manufactured the entire issue because she resented losing her job. Judge Cole did not approve a full release. She allowed a narrow preliminary inspection by the county records officer, Daniel, and counsel for both sides. Naomi could attend only as a factual witness because she had helped organize the archive. The limitation frustrated her, but it also protected the process. The evidence had to survive more than outrage. It had to survive scrutiny. At the county repository, the red-sealed box was brought from a climate-controlled shelf behind 2 locked doors. The records officer read the accession number aloud. Daniel verified it against the court order. Leonard's attorney watched every movement. Naomi stood with her hands folded, afraid to breathe too loudly. Inside the box were several folders, each stamped with dates and certification marks. The first contained Arthur's Capacity Safeguard Directive, executed 7 years earlier. It did not declare that Arthur would always be competent. It did something more careful. It required that if he ever suffered a condition affecting speech or conventional communication, any assessment of his decision-making ability had to include a qualified specialist familiar with supported communication methods. It also required that no family member with a financial interest in a pending corporate transaction could be appointed to control his voting shares without an independent review. Leonard's attorney dismissed the directive as old planning material. Daniel did not. The document was signed, witnessed, and properly certified. More damaging still, Leonard's name appeared on the final page. He had signed as an acknowledging witness. The second folder contained a limited trust amendment. Arthur had placed a portion of his controlling shares into a protective arrangement designed to prevent a guardian from using temporary medical vulnerability to force a corporate transaction. If Arthur could not communicate, the shares were not to be handed automatically to a relative. They were to be placed under a neutral fiduciary until Arthur's capacity had been properly assessed through the protocol he had chosen. The third folder was more troubling. It included minutes from a private meeting held after Leonard had once asked Arthur to sign broad proxy forms during a period of illness 3 years earlier. Arthur had refused. Beatrice had insisted that the conversation be documented. The minutes did not call Leonard a criminal. They did not predict the future. They simply recorded that Arthur was concerned about pressure from people who might benefit from his inability to participate fully in company decisions. That concern had been sealed with the rest of the archive, because Beatrice believed it could become a family weapon if it were made public too soon. At the end of the inspection, The records officer discovered a fourth folder that had been marked for release only if a petition for guardianship was filed by a person named in the earlier documents. The folder was still sealed in red wax. That was the box Naomi carried into court. Leonard had not expected it to appear. He had expected the archive to remain locked behind procedure long enough for him to gain emergency control. He had expected Arthur's silence to do the work for him. And when he saw the red seal in Naomi's arms, he understood that the courtroom was no longer a place where he could control every question. Judge Cole did not open the sealed folder that first morning. She ordered a short evidentiary hearing, required the parties to submit the materials for verification, and appointed an independent communication specialist to evaluate Arthur. It was not the victory Naomi wanted, but it was the first time in 6 weeks that Arthur's condition would be examined without Leonard deciding what his silence meant. As court recessed, Leonard walked past Naomi without looking at her. His face had returned to its public expression of patience and grief, but his hands were clenched hard enough that the skin around his knuckles had turned pale. Naomi watched him leave and felt no satisfaction yet. The red seal had not proved anything. It had only bought time. And time was exactly what Leonard had been trying to steal. The 48 hours that followed were the longest Arthur had spent without Leonard controlling the story told about him. For the first time since the stroke, people entered his room without first asking Leonard whether the visit was necessary. The independent specialist appointed by Judge Cole was Dr. Alina Mercer, a neuropsychologist whose work focused on assessing decision-making ability in people with aphasia, traumatic brain injury, and other communication disabilities. She did not arrive with a stack of rapid-fire verbal questions and a stopwatch. She arrived with a tablet, written options, visual scales, financial summaries formatted in plain language, and the patience to let silence mean thought rather than failure. Dr. Mercer spent nearly 4 hours with Arthur over 2 sessions. She asked him to identify people he trusted, explain the purpose of his major holdings, recognize the difference between selling an asset and granting someone control over it, and indicate whether he understood the consequences of a guardian voting his shares. She used yes or no confirmation methods, written keywords, picture-supported questions, and repeated checks to make sure a gesture was not being misunderstood. Arthur was slow. Sometimes he became exhausted and had to stop. Sometimes a word appeared on his screen only after several attempts, but the substance of his answers was consistent. He knew the value of his principal assets. He knew the proposed Horizon Vale transaction. He recognized Leonard's role in it. He understood that a guardian could make choices he did not want. And when asked whether he wanted Leonard to control his health decisions or voting shares, Arthur rejected that choice with a clarity that no one in the room could honestly misread. That conclusion did not end the case. Leonard's lawyers argued that capacity could fluctuate and that the complexity of a corporate sale required more than basic understanding. They suggested that Arthur's refusal of Leonard was emotional, influenced by Naomi, and not a reason to leave important decisions unprotected. Their strategy was subtle. They no longer needed to prove Arthur was completely unaware. They only needed to persuade the judge that fear and complexity justified taking control away from him. Daniel began with the independent report. He walked the court through the difference between speech impairment and impaired reasoning. He emphasized that Arthur did not need to prove that he could speak like he had before the stroke. He needed only to show that he could understand and communicate decisions through methods appropriate to his condition. The law was not supposed to reward people for refusing to provide the support that would allow a disabled person to be heard. Leonard's attorney attacked the report carefully. He pointed to Arthur's fatigue. He questioned whether visual aids had made the answers too simple. He noted that Dr. Mercer had met Arthur after Naomi raised concerns, implying that the entire evaluation had been shaped by a former employee's agenda. He tried to turn every accommodation into proof of manipulation. Dr. Mercer did not become defensive. She explained that accommodations did not put thoughts into Arthur's mind. They removed barriers that prevented other people from hearing thoughts already there. She explained that a person using glasses was not being coached to see, and that a person using an interpreter was not being coached to speak. The same principle applied to supported communication. At first, Dr. Vale appeared confident. He had years of clinical experience and a respected private practice. His original assessment was concise, formal, and built around familiar categories. Arthur had failed to answer certain verbal questions quickly. He had struggled to repeat phrases. He had become frustrated during testing. Dr. Vale had concluded that these failures indicated substantial cognitive decline. Daniel did not accuse him of lying. Instead, he asked what methods he had used to distinguish aphasia from loss of executive function. Dr. Vale acknowledged that he had not used a communication board, written choice assessment, extended response time, or consultation with a speech-language specialist. He said the setting had been urgent and that he relied on professional judgment. Daniel then asked whether Leonard's office had arranged the assessment and whether Leonard had remained nearby during portions of the examination. Dr. Vale said yes. He explained that Leonard had been concerned about Arthur's agitation and wanted the process completed quickly. The next question changed the air in the room. Daniel asked whether Dr. Vale had disclosed a consulting agreement between his clinic and Northwatch Strategies. The agreement had been found in documents produced after the court ordered a limited financial disclosure. It was not a direct payment for the guardianship opinion. That would have been too obvious. Instead, Northwatch had retained Dr. Vale's clinic months earlier to provide executive wellness consulting for a future transition project. The work had not yet begun in any meaningful way, but the contract promised a substantial fee if the Horizon Vale transaction closed. The capacity directive from the Lantern Archive showed that Leonard had known about the safeguards. The trust amendment showed he could not automatically control Arthur's shares if he stood to gain from a pending transaction. But Leonard continued to deny that he had any personal interest in the Horizon Vale sale. He claimed Northwatch was an outside consultant chosen by the buyer. He claimed he had no ownership in it, no promised payment, and no reason to want the vote outcome beyond the good of the company. Then Daniel introduced the records obtained through the court-supervised review of Ren Meridian's transaction files. They were not sensational documents. There was no single email in which Leonard confessed to stealing from Arthur. There was no recording of him laughing about his uncle's stroke. The truth arrived in the way real financial deception often arrived, through dates, signatures, spreadsheets, and words that had been chosen too carefully. The first document was an early draft of the Horizon Vale term sheet. In its original form, Northwatch was listed as an independent transition advisor. In a later version, a small notation appeared in the payment schedule. It referred to an incentive allocation for a beneficial participant identified only by initials. Daniel displayed a separate compliance questionnaire signed by Leonard during negotiations. On that form, Leonard had answered that he had no direct or indirect financial interest in any outside party connected to the transaction. The initials in the incentive schedule matched Leonard's full legal name. Leonard's attorney objected immediately. He argued that initials were ambiguous. Daniel agreed that, standing alone, they could mean many things. He then introduced a second document, a private side letter between Northwatch and a holding company called Hale Family Ventures. The holding company was not listed on Ren Meridian's public disclosures, but corporate registration records showed that it was controlled by a trust established for Leonard's children. The side letter promised that if the sale closed, Hale Family Ventures would receive a percentage of Northwatch's success fee. The payment would not go directly into Leonard's personal account. It would flow through a family trust designed to make the connection difficult to see at a glance. That was not merely a conflict of interest. It was the exact type of indirect financial benefit Arthur's trust amendment had been created to prevent. Leonard's expression did not collapse. He was too disciplined for that. But the rhythm of his composure changed. He began consulting with his lawyer more often. He stopped looking at Arthur. And for the first time, the people who had believed his story could see the outline of the trap he had built. Daniel continued. The next record showed that the guardianship petition had been prepared using information from a draft proxy package. The proxy package was dated 4 days before Leonard filed in court. It assumed that someone other than Arthur would control his voting shares at the upcoming board meeting. It did not name Leonard directly, but the instructions matched the authority he sought in the guardianship petition. Leonard had not simply responded to a medical crisis. He had begun arranging the corporate consequences of Arthur's incapacity before a judge had ever examined whether Arthur was incapable. Judge Cole asked whether there was evidence Leonard had discussed the proxy plan before Arthur's stroke. Daniel said there was not. He did not exaggerate. The court could not punish a man for plans that had not been proven. But the sequence after the stroke was enough to show urgency of a different kind. Leonard had treated Arthur's illness as an opportunity before he treated it as a human tragedy. At that point, the county records officer was called forward with the final red-sealed folder from the Lantern archive. The procedure was slow by design. The officer identified the accession number, confirmed the court order, and described the condition of the seal. Daniel and Leonard's counsel examined it. Judge Cole asked whether either party disputed that the seal had remained intact since it was placed in county custody. Neither did. When the officer broke the wax, the sound was quiet. It was not the sound of a dramatic weapon being drawn. It was the sound of a barrier giving way after years of pressure. Yet every person in the courtroom heard it, because Leonard had spent the entire case trying to make sure that folder remained closed. Inside was a memorandum prepared jointly by Arthur and Beatrice 7 years earlier, along with a notarized statement from the attorney who had advised them at the time. The memorandum described an incident involving blank proxy forms and a proposed transfer of authority. Leonard had approached Arthur during a period of illness following surgery and urged him to sign documents that would allow Leonard to act quickly in corporate matters. Arthur had refused after reading the papers. Beatrice had been disturbed enough to insist on a written record. The memorandum did not claim Leonard had committed a crime then. It stated that Arthur believed Leonard had minimized the scope of the proxy forms and had become angry when asked to wait for independent counsel. Because the family chose not to make the matter public, the documents had been stored in the Lantern archive as part of Arthur's future capacity planning. Attached to the memorandum was a statement of intent signed by Arthur. It said that if any future health condition limited his speech or mobility, he wanted the people around him to distinguish between inability to perform quickly and inability to decide. It stated that he did not want Leonard appointed as guardian proxy, conservator, or controller of his voting shares without an independent review, particularly if Leonard could benefit from a company transaction. Leonard had signed an acknowledgement that he had received notice of this statement. That signature was the moment his defense became almost impossible to sustain. For weeks, he had told the court he believed he was the natural person to take charge because Arthur had never expressed any other preference. He had sworn that he knew of no binding instructions limiting his role. Now the court had certified documents showing that he knew exactly what Arthur wanted and had been warned years earlier that he was not to use illness as a path to control. The damage went beyond the guardianship case. It reached his credibility in every statement he had made under oath. Judge Cole did not rush to pronounce judgment. She reviewed the materials, asked questions about dates, and gave Leonard's attorney time to respond. The lawyer argued that the old memorandum reflected a family disagreement, not a legal finding. He argued that Leonard's signature on an acknowledgement did not mean he remembered every provision years later. He argued that his client's concern for Arthur could still be genuine, despite an undisclosed financial interest. Some of those arguments were not absurd. That was what made the case important. Justice did not require pretending that every difficult family conflict had a simple villain. It required looking at the entire pattern. The pattern was what condemned Leonard. Arthur's speech had been impaired, but he had been denied meaningful accommodations. Leonard had sought emergency control at the exact moment Arthur's shares mattered most. Leonard had withheld capacity safeguards that named him as a conflicted party. His doctor had failed to disclose a financial relationship connected to the transaction. A hidden family trust stood to profit from the sale. And the sealed record established that Leonard had been warned years earlier that Arthur feared exactly this kind of pressure. Taken together, it was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a strategy. Before Judge Cole issued her decision, she asked Arthur whether he wished to make his own preference known. Arthur's communication tablet rested on the table in front of him. Dr. Mercer sat nearby but did not touch it. Arthur looked at the screen for a long time. His left hand moved slowly, selecting letters one by one. He paused. He deleted a letter. He began again. No one hurried him. No one interpreted the silence for him. For the first time since his stroke, the entire room waited for Arthur at Arthur's pace. When he finished, Dr. Mercer verified the message with him using a second method. Arthur confirmed that he did not want Leonard to make decisions for him. He confirmed that he wanted independent assistance while recovering. And he confirmed that he wanted the housing division protected until he could participate fully in any decision affecting it. The meaning was simple. Arthur had never asked to be rescued from his own life. He had asked to be heard. Judge Cole denied Leonard's petition for emergency guardianship. She found that Arthur had demonstrated decision-making capacity with appropriate supports, and that Leonard's undisclosed financial interests created a serious conflict. She ordered that no one could exercise authority over Arthur's personal voting shares without further court approval. She directed the parties to implement a supported decision-making plan, including access to independent medical, legal, and communication professionals. She also ordered the record transmitted to the appropriate authorities for review of possible false statements in the guardianship petition, undisclosed conflicts of interest, and financial misconduct connected to the proposed transaction. The order did not declare Leonard guilty of crimes. It did something more immediate and more devastating. It removed his ability to hide behind the appearance of concern. The court had not sent him away in handcuffs. There was no satisfying instant punishment. Instead, the court had ordered Leonard to be released. He was to be released on bail. 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 He was to be releas No sudden collapse under flashing cameras. Leonard left the courtroom surrounded by lawyers, his face pale and controlled. But the world he had built depended on people believing that he was trustworthy. That belief had been broken in public by the very process he had tried to use as a weapon. The consequences unfolded over the following months. Ren Meridian's board placed Leonard on administrative leave while an independent investigation began. Several directors who had accepted his version of events admitted that they had not asked enough questions about Arthur's condition or the Horizon Vale proposal. The sale was halted. The company's compliance office discovered that Northwatch had been included in internal planning long before it had been properly disclosed. Investigators traced the expected success fee through Hale Family Ventures and found additional communications showing that Leonard had pressed staff to speed the guardianship filing before the board vote. Dr. Vale faced a separate professional review. His report was not treated as worthless simply because it was inconvenient. Medical errors and conflicts needed evidence, not anger. But reviewers concluded that he had failed to use appropriate methods for a patient with aphasia and had not disclosed a material financial connection. His opinion was formally withdrawn from the guardianship case, and his clinic lost several institutional contracts that depended on public trust. Leonard's legal troubles took longer, as real legal troubles often did. Financial records had to be examined. Witnesses had to be interviewed. Lawyers argued over intent, disclosure rules, and the difference between poor judgment and criminal deception. But the investigation did not disappear. It grew. And the same careful documentation Leonard had believed he could control became the trail that followed him. Arthur did not return overnight to the man he had been before the stroke. Recovery was uneven. Some days, speaking remained exhausting. Some days, he grew angry at the patience his new life required. But the difference was that no one used those difficult days as permission to take away his choices. With Dr. Mercer's support, Arthur learned new communication tools. He began attending shortboard sessions remotely, reviewing materials in advance, and responding through a combination of typed notes, visual summaries, and scheduled breaks. The first time he voted against reopening negotiations with Horizon Vale, he did so slowly and unmistakably. The board secretary recorded the vote. No one called it confusion. He also made a decision that surprised many people. Instead of simply preserving the housing division under his personal control, Arthur transferred a significant share of it into a community benefit structure. Employees, tenant representatives, and an independent public interest board received defined oversight roles. The arrangement did not solve every problem. It did not turn a corporation into a perfect institution, but it made it harder for one ambitious executive to sell a mission built by thousands of people without answering to those people. Naomi refused the public attention that came afterward. Reporters tried to describe her as a hero, but she disliked the word. Heroes, she thought, were often used to make ordinary responsibilities sound extraordinary. She had only done what her work had taught her to do: preserve what mattered, ask what was missing, and refuse to let a person be erased because listening required effort. Arthur asked her to return to Ren Meridian, not as an assistant and not as a symbolic employee. He offered her the role of director of the newly expanded Lantern Archive and its companion advocacy program. The program would help families understand supported decision-making, protect older adults from financial exploitation, and teach organizations how to communicate with people whose disabilities made them easy to dismiss. Naomi accepted only after insisting on one condition. The program could not exist merely to polish the company's image. It had to serve people who had no connection to Ren Meridian and no ability to repay the help. Arthur agreed. A year later, the Lantern Center opened in a restored building near the old factory. Its walls held photographs of workers, copies of historical agreements, and shelves of records that many executives would once have called obsolete. There were meeting rooms for families, legal clinics staffed by volunteers, communication resources for stroke survivors, and a quiet reading room where Naomi kept Beatrice's brass paperweight beneath a glass case. Arthur attended the opening. He spoke only a few words, each one hard-earned. But he did not need many. The people in the room waited for him. That was the difference. Naomi stood near the archive room afterward and watched a young woman help her grandfather use a tablet to fill out a form. The older man took his time. No one reached for the device to answer in his place. No one called him confused because the silence lasted longer than expected. Naomi thought about the first morning in court when Leonard had tried to make her look like the problem. He had underestimated her because her work was quiet. He had underestimated Arthur because his speech was slow. He had underestimated records because he believed power belonged to whoever held the microphone. But truth did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it waited in a sealed box. Sometimes it lived in a forgotten signature. Sometimes it survived because an ordinary person refused to throw away what others wanted erased. The lesson of Arthur Wren's case was not that every wealthy family hid a villain behind a polished smile. It wasn't that illness always revealed betrayal. The deeper lesson was that dignity depends on more than the ability to speak quickly, look powerful, or defend yourself in the language others expect. A person can be silent and still be certain. A person can be disabled and still deserve control over their own life. And whenever someone insists that another human being is too weak to be heard, we should ask who benefits from the silence. Because the most dangerous people are not always the ones who shout. Sometimes they are the ones who speak softly while reaching for someone else's voice. And sometimes all it takes to stop them is one person willing to preserve the truth until the moment the world is finally ready to listen. Before anyone knew his name, a soaked stranger walked into the restaurant looking like he might not survive another minute.
Do not let him near the tables.
Then his strength faded in the middle of lunch, and the room treated his need like something shameful to avoid. Only Naomi moved toward him, not because she was fearless, but because everyone else had chosen distance.
Somebody call emergency services now.
Naomi saw a human being where everyone else saw trouble, dirt, danger, or an interruption to their lunch.
Please, I'm sorry.
Kendra Blythe did not ask whether the man was breathing. She only saw him as a stain on her restaurant.
Stand up before you make this place look filthy.
Naomi had almost nothing left, but she spent her last money, so the stranger would not reach the hospital hungry.
Compassion is not in your job description. Take off the apron. You are done here. Use the back door. Even let her leave through the front door.
She sent Naomi into the rain like shame belonged to her. The customers who had watched Naomi kneel beside a dying man now watched her lose her job for it. Some looked away. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked relieved that the punishment had not landed on them. Only one person tried to follow her. A busboy named Isaiah, barely 19, took 2 steps forward before Kendra's stare pinned him back in place. He had 2 younger sisters and a mother on disability. Fear did what cruelty always depends on it to do. Naomi left with her apron folded in her hands, her final tip still trapped in Kendra's locked drawer, and rain soaking through her shoes by the time she reached the bus stop. That night, she told her Aunt Lottie only part of the truth. Lottie Reed was 68, though illness had aged her unevenly. Some mornings, she remembered entire hymns from childhood and the smell of Naomi's mother's perfume. Other mornings, she forgot the word for window. A stroke 3 years earlier had weakened her left side, and a slow fog had settled over her memory after that, arriving in patches that came and went without warning. Naomi had moved into the little apartment on Anson Street to care for her after Naomi's mother died of heart failure, because there had been no one else willing and no money for proper help. Naomi had once been on a different path. At 18, she had graduated near the top of her class, with a scholarship letter from a nursing program folded in a Bible on her mother's dresser. Teachers had called her steady. Counselors had called her promising. Her mother had called her the one who would break the cycle. But cycles do not break just because a letter says congratulations. Sometimes they tighten. Sometimes a hospital bill arrives. Sometimes a caregiver is needed more urgently than a dreamer. So Naomi traded lecture halls for double shifts, textbooks for order pads, and a future with clean white shoes for work shoes that pinched until her toes went numb. She did not regret caring for Lottie. Love was not the problem. The problem was that love did not pay rent, did not refill prescriptions, did not stop landlords from taping notices to doors. The problem was that people praised sacrifice from a distance, then punished the person making it for being tired. By dawn, after the longest night of her life, Naomi had calculated everything and found no answer. Without the diner, she had no paycheck. Without the paycheck, she had no rent. Without rent, Lottie could lose the only home she recognized. Naomi had prayed, but even prayer felt like it had to squeeze through a ceiling crowded with other desperate voices. Then the envelope came. It did not arrive in the mail. It did not come with a knock. It slid silently under the door just before sunrise, a pale blue rectangle against the scratched wooden floor. Naomi stared at it for several seconds before standing. Her first thought was that it might be another notice from the landlord. Her second was that she no longer had room in her chest for one more bad thing. The envelope had her name written across the front in dark ink, not printed. Written, Naomi Reed. The letters were careful, almost old-fashioned. There was no return address, only a small embossed mark in the corner, a lantern surrounded by 3 waves. Inside was not money. That almost disappointed her before she could stop herself. Inside was a single card, thick and expensive, with an address on East Bay Street and a request for her presence that morning at 9. Beneath the address was a line that made Naomi sit down before her knees could make the decision for her. It said that her act at the Mariners' table had not gone unseen. That was all. No explanation. No signature she recognized. Just that sentence, sitting in her lap like a match struck in a dark room. Naomi almost threw it away. People in trouble learn caution. Miracles, when they appear too suddenly, often come with hidden hooks. But the address belonged to the old Peabody House, a restored building near the harbor that Naomi knew only from passing it on the bus. It had once been a shipping office. Now, according to the brass plaque she had seen from the sidewalk, it belonged to something called the Lantern Harbor Foundation. She searched the name on her cracked phone. The screen loaded slowly, then showed a website full of polished photographs, food programs, mobile clinics, emergency shelters, legal aid, hurricane relief. The foundation had been started decades earlier, by a shipping family that had turned old warehouse money into charity. Its current chair was a woman named Celeste Vane, known in Charleston for giving away money with one hand and guarding her privacy with the other. Naomi did not understand what any of it had to do with her. Still, at 8:30, after making sure Lottie had breakfast and leaving the neighbor with a number to call in case of trouble, Naomi put on her cleanest blouse, brushed lint from her coat, and took the bus toward East Bay Street. She carried the blue envelope in her bag like evidence in a trial no one had explained. The Peabody house looked even larger up close. Its windows were tall and arched, its brick washed clean by rain, its front steps flanked by planters full of white flowers that looked too expensive to touch. Naomi paused at the bottom step, suddenly aware of her shoes, her tired eyes, and the faint smell of diner grease still caught in her hair, no matter how carefully she had washed it. A security guard opened the door before she reached it. He did not ask whether she belonged. He said her name with respect and guided her inside. That unsettled her, more than suspicion would have. The lobby was warm and quiet. Not rich in the loud way of chandeliers and marble meant to impress, but in the deep, quiet way of places built by people who expect the world to move aside. Oil paintings lined the walls. A long table held brochures about flood relief and food access. Near the back, through a set of open doors, Naomi saw a conference room where 3 people stood waiting. One was Celeste Vane. She was in her 70s, silver-haired, straight-backed, and smaller than Naomi expected. Her face held the calm of someone who had survived more than her portrait suggested. Beside her stood a lawyer with a leather folder, and near the window, wrapped in a clean sweater, thinner but alive, was the man from the diner. Naomi stopped breathing for a moment. The man looked different without rainwater dripping from his coat. His beard had been trimmed. His skin still carried the grayness of recovery, but his eyes were clear. He was not polished. He was not suddenly transformed into someone untouched by pain, but he was alive. And when he saw Naomi, the shame in his expression changed into something more fragile and more difficult to bear: gratitude. Celeste Vane did not begin with grand speeches. She explained gently that the man Naomi had helped was named Adrian Vane, her only son. He had not been missing in the way newspapers like to describe missing heirs. His story was messier, more human, and far less convenient for gossip. Years earlier, after the death of his wife and little daughter in a highway accident, Adrian had withdrawn from the world he once helped serve. Grief had taken the shape of silence, then isolation, then a long wandering that no family money could easily fix. He had refused interviews, refused board meetings, refused even the name that tied him to wealth. For months, he had been living between shelters, ferry terminals, and hospital waiting rooms, convinced that the comfort of his family was something he no longer deserved. The Foundation had searched for him quietly. Too much publicity could have turned his suffering into entertainment. Too much pressure could have driven him farther away. On the day Naomi found him, Adrian had been trying to reach the Foundation office on foot after losing his medication and his wallet during a storm. He had made it only as far as the Mariners table. Every person in that restaurant had seen a problem. Naomi had seen a person. Celeste made sure Naomi understood that this difference had likely saved Adrian's life. The emergency physician had said another hour in the cold rain, with his blood sugar collapsing and his body weakened, might have ended very differently. The meal Naomi paid for had arrived with the paramedics' paperwork and had become the detail that made everyone at the hospital talk. not because of its cost, but because of what it cost Naomi. Naomi felt heat rise behind her eyes. She tried to say that anyone would have done the same, but even as the thought formed, she knew it was not true. Everyone had been there. Everyone had seen him. Most had chosen distance. Celeste then did something Naomi did not expect. She did not offer a reward in the crude way people sometimes pay for conscience, as if kindness were a lost wallet returned for a fee. Instead, she asked Naomi about her life, not with pity, not with the polished curiosity of donors touring poverty for an afternoon. She asked as if Naomi's answers mattered. Naomi did not tell everything at first. Pride has its own survival instinct. But Celeste had spent decades listening to people who were tired of needing help, and she knew how to wait. Slowly, Naomi told her about Lottie, the unpaid rent, the nursing scholarship that had expired, the diner job, and the way Kendra had dismissed her in front of a room full of witnesses. She left out the most humiliating details until Adrian, from beside the window, lowered his head as though each one had landed on him personally. By the end of the meeting, Naomi's life had changed in ways she could not immediately absorb. The Lantern Harbor Foundation offered her a position coordinating a new community meals program called Harbor Hands, which would partner with local restaurants to create emergency meal vouchers for people in crisis. The salary was more than double what she had made at the diner. The benefits included home care support that could help with Lottie's medical needs. The foundation's housing attorney would contact Naomi's landlord that afternoon to stop the eviction and settle the arrears from a hardship fund, not as charity tossed from above, but as stabilization for a caregiver who had been carrying too much alone. Naomi listened with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. She had expected, at most, a thank you note, perhaps a small check, perhaps nothing she could rely on. She had not expected an opening. She had not expected someone to look at her years of sacrifice and see qualifications instead of weakness. Celeste explained that the foundation did not need someone who merely understood policy. It needed someone who understood hunger without making hungry people feel small. It needed someone who knew the difference between feeding a person and humiliating them. It needed someone who had proven, under pressure, that human dignity mattered even when it was inconvenient. Naomi accepted. But stories like Naomi's do not end the moment good news arrives. In real life, blessings often disturb the people who benefited from your struggle. And Kendra Blythe had built too much of her little kingdom on Naomi, staying silent, poor, and disposable to accept Naomi's rise quietly. At first, Kendra only heard rumors. A delivery driver mentioned that the waitress she had fired had been seen entering the Peabody house. A former customer called the restaurant, asking whether it was true that the woman who helped the collapsed man now worked for the Lantern Harbor Foundation. Isaiah, trying and failing to hide his smile, told another server that Naomi's rent had been handled and her aunt would get medical support. By closing time, Kendra was no longer angry. She was afraid. Fear is different in people who are used to having power. It does not make them humble. It makes them dangerous. Kendra knew things the staff did not. She knew that for nearly 2 years, she had been skimming from the cash drawer in small amounts that looked like counting errors. She knew she had been marking donated community meals as served, then pocketing the reimbursement money when the owner was away. She knew she had refused hungry people at the door while reporting that the restaurant had participated in local relief efforts. She knew the jar labeled Storm Meal Fund had been emptied by her hand more than once. its coins and bills treated as a private bonus for the trouble of pretending to care. She also knew Naomi had noticed irregularities. Naomi had never accused her. Naomi had been too busy surviving. But she had asked questions. She had once wondered why a church group's prepaid meal vouchers were missing from the drawer. She had once found a voided receipt under the printer with Kendra's manager code on it. She had once given a free bowl of gumbo to a veteran after Kendra claimed the voucher program had ended, only for Naomi to discover the next week that the program was still active. At the time, Kendra had dismissed the questions as confusion. Now she saw them as threats. By the next morning, Kendra had created a new story. According to her, Naomi had not been fired for helping a stranger. Naomi had been fired after an internal review suggested she had stolen money from the register and used a medical emergency to distract from it. Kendra did not make the accusation loudly at first. She was too strategic. She let it leak in pieces, through staff whispers, through a carefully worded email to the restaurant owner, through a complaint sent to the Lantern Harbor Foundation's general inbox. The complaint claimed that Naomi Reed was dishonest, unstable, and unfit to handle charitable funds. To make the lie look official, Kendra pressured Isaiah to sign a witness note stating that he had seen Naomi near the drawer before cash went missing. Isaiah refused at first. He said he had seen nothing like that. But Kendra knew his schedule, his family situation, and his fear of losing the only job close enough to home. She cut his hours in half for 1 week, then returned them with a warning hidden behind a smile. By the second week, Isaiah signed a statement he hated himself for signing. Kendra also convinced a prep cook named Marisol to say Naomi had been upset about money. That part was technically true, which made the lie harder to fight. Naomi had been upset about money because poverty had been pressing its knee against her chest for years. Kendra twisted that human truth into motive. When the foundation received the complaint, they did what responsible organizations must do. They placed Naomi on temporary administrative leave while the matter was reviewed. Celeste herself called Naomi and made it clear that leave was not judgment, but process. Still, the word leave felt like a door closing. Naomi had held her new job for only 11 days. The apartment that had begun to feel safe became heavy again. Lottie sensed Naomi's sadness even through the fog of her memory. Some evenings, she reached for Naomi's hand without knowing exactly why. Naomi tried not to cry in front of her. She had cried enough into dishwater, enough into bus windows, enough silently behind the walk-in freezer at the diner. She was tired of tears that changed nothing. What hurt most was not even the risk of losing the job. It was the precision of the lie. Kendra had chosen the accusation that would wound Naomi deepest because Naomi had spent her whole life guarding her integrity. Poor people learned that one mistake can become their whole identity. In the mouths of people looking for reasons to dismiss them, Naomi had always kept receipts, counted change twice, returned overpayments, corrected tips when customers wrote too much by accident. She knew how quickly a black woman in a service uniform could be called dishonest by someone whose own theft wore perfume and a manager badge. For 3 days, Naomi heard nothing. During those 3 days, Kendra enjoyed herself. She moved through the mariner's table with renewed sharpness, telling staff that consequences were finally catching up with people who played saint for attention. She pretended not to care when customers asked about Naomi, then made sure they received a version of events muddy enough to stain her. She even printed a new policy about employee conduct during emergencies, as if compassion had been a workplace hazard. But lies require maintenance. Truth can sit quietly and wait. The first crack came from Isaiah. Guilt can make a room feel too small. Isaiah stopped sleeping. He replayed the moment Naomi knelt beside Adrian, the way she had held his hand without flinching, the way everyone else, including him, had stood back. He replayed the moment Kendra pushed the witness note toward him and reminded him how many people wanted his job. He thought about his sisters, yes, but he also thought about what kind of man he was becoming if fear could make him harm the one person who had always treated him like he mattered. On the fourth morning, Isaiah went to the foundation office before his shift. He arrived shaking harder than Adrian had shaken in the diner, carrying a folded copy of the statement he had signed. He told the foundation's review attorney that it was false. He admitted Kendra had pressured him. He admitted he had never seen Naomi steal anything. He admitted something else, too. For months, he had watched Kendra remove cash from the Storm Meal Fund jar and replace donation vouchers with blank slips. That confession did not clear Naomi immediately, but it shifted the room. The second crack came from Marisol. She had been quiet for years because she needed work, and because Kendra had a way of making every immigrant employee feel one document away from disaster, whether that was true or not. Marisol had signed nothing, but she had allowed Kendra to use her name in the complaint. When she learned Isaiah had gone to the foundation, she did not want him standing alone. She brought what Kendra had forgotten existed: photographs. Months earlier, Marisol had photographed several prep lists and reimbursement sheets because Kendra kept blaming kitchen staff for missing voucher meals. At the time, Marisol had only wanted proof that the kitchen had prepared what it was told to prepare. But the photos showed a pattern. On days when the restaurant claimed to have served 20 donated meals, the kitchen had prepared 6. On days when reimbursement forms showed full distribution, staff meal logs showed no matching plates. Several forms had Kendra's manager code. Some had Naomi's initials forged badly enough that anyone who knew her handwriting could see the insult. The third crack came from Adrian. Recovery had not made him suddenly powerful in the way people imagine wealth fixes everything. He was still grieving. He still moved carefully through rooms. He still carried guilt like a second spine. But he had one thing Kendra had not counted on: memory sharpened by humiliation. Adrian remembered the man in the navy suit recording him when he fell. He remembered the angle of the phone. He remembered the table. He remembered the woman at the register who had complained about the interruption while filming half the room. The foundation's attorney tracked the video after a younger staff member found a clipped version online, posted without context, under a caption mocking the stranger on the floor. The internet, for all its cruelty, sometimes preserves what liars hope will disappear. The clipped version showed Naomi kneeling. It showed customers backing away. It showed Kendra standing with folded arms. But it did not show the register clearly. The foundation needed more. The restaurant's internal cameras, according to Kendra, had malfunctioned that day. The owner, Mr. Harlan Cho, was told the system had overwritten the footage. That should have ended the matter. It did not. Mr. Cho had inherited the mariner's table from his father, who had opened it after serving as a Navy cook. Harlan was not a cruel man, but he was an absent one. And absence in leadership often becomes permission for someone worse to take over. He had trusted Kendra because she kept the restaurant profitable and problems quiet. He had ignored small complaints because he was tired, overextended, and grieving his own divorce. When the Lantern Harbor Foundation contacted him directly, he expected a misunderstanding. Instead, he discovered that his security system had not failed. Kendra had disabled the local storage, but she had forgotten about the backup connected to the insurance provider after a break-in the previous year. The footage wasn't on the restaurant computer. It was in a secure archive she did not know how to erase. Harlan watched it alone first. He watched Naomi serving tables during the rush. He watched Adrian enter, soaked and unsteady. He watched the room recoil. He watched Naomi kneel while Kendra stood back. He watched Naomi ask for emergency help. He watched her pay at the register with her own debit card, not remove money from it. He watched Kendra take Naomi's apron and send her out the side door. Then Harlan kept watching. The archive held more than that day. It held weeks. It held Kendra opening the donation jar after closing. It held her removing envelopes from the voucher drawer. It held her entering manager codes during cash outs, voiding meals that had been paid for by community partners, and slipping bills into the side pocket of her blazer. It held her handing Isaiah the witness note in the storage hallway, pointing toward the schedule board, and making the threat clear even without audio. The truth had not needed to shout. It had needed someone to look. When Naomi was called back to the foundation office, she expected another question, another form, another polite expression from people deciding whether to believe her. Instead, she found Celeste, Adrian, Harlan Cho, Isaiah, Marisol, and the foundation attorney seated around the same conference table where hope had first begun to feel possible. Naomi stood at the doorway, uncertain whether she had entered a trial or a rescue. Celeste did not make her wait. She explained that the accusations had been withdrawn, disproven, and referred for further action. Harlan apologized, with a face so pale, it seemed the shame had drained him. He admitted that his trust in Kendra had allowed harm to grow under his roof. Isaiah cried before he could finish his apology. Marisol kept her eyes lowered until Naomi crossed the room and touched her shoulder. Not because Naomi owed anyone comfort, but because she understood what fear could do to good people trapped under bad authority. Adrian said the least, but his presence said enough. He had been the man on the floor. Now he was one of the reasons the truth was standing. Naomi was cleared fully. Her leave was ended. Her name was restored. But restoration, for someone who has been publicly humiliated, is not simply a letter saying the matter is closed. A lie travels through people. It enters rooms before you do. It sits in the air, waiting to see whether you will defend yourself or shrink. Celeste understood that. So did Harlan. The Mariners' table held a staff meeting the following Monday before opening. This time, Naomi did not enter through the side door. She entered through the front. The same bell rang above her head, bright and careless, just as it had the day Adrian collapsed. But the room felt different now. The chairs were stacked on tables. The floor smelled of lemon cleaner. The staff stood near the counter, tense and quiet. Kendra was there too, though no longer behind the host stand. Her makeup was perfect, but her face had lost the confidence that once made people step aside. Harlan spoke first, not with the polished language of corporate apologies, but with the rough honesty of a man who had finally looked at what his neglect had cost. He told the staff that Naomi Reed had been wrongfully fired, falsely accused, and publicly mistreated for doing what every decent person in that room should have done. He confirmed that Kendra Blythe had been terminated for cause, and that evidence of theft, intimidation, falsification of records, and charity fraud had been turned over to the proper authorities. Kendra tried to hold herself stiff, as if posture could substitute for innocence. But there are moments when a person's own silence becomes a confession. She had spent years making others feel small under fluorescent lights. Now she stood under the same lights, while the room learned what she had done. The poetic justice was not loud, it was precise. Kendra had fired Naomi for feeding a hungry stranger, and now the theft that destroyed her reputation came from money meant to feed hungry strangers. She had accused Naomi of stealing from a register, and the register logs exposed her. She had used employees' fear to create false statements, and those same employees became the witnesses who helped undo her. She had sent Naomi through the side door in shame, and Naomi returned through the front, while Kendra left, escorted by the owner she had deceived. No one applauded. It was better that way. Applause might have made it feel like a performance. This was not a performance. It was accountability. Kendra's downfall did not end at the sidewalk. Investigators later found that the stolen voucher funds were larger than anyone first believed. Several small churches had paid the Mariners' Table in advance to provide hot meals during storms, believing their donations had reached people who needed them. Some had not. A veterans group had sponsored meal cards that were quietly canceled in the system. A neighborhood relief fund had been billed for plates never served. Kendra had not merely stolen cash. She had stolen trust from people who gave what little they had to help others. The charges that followed did not make Naomi happy. She was not the kind of person who found joy in someone else's ruin. But she did feel something steadier than happiness. She felt the weight of a foot lifting from her neck. She felt the world, for once, refusing to ask the wounded person to be the only one who pays. Kendra tried to find another management job, but Charleston is smaller than pride imagines. People talk, records travel, references matter. The same polished confidence that once opened doors now raised questions she could not answer. For the first time in years, Kendra had to live without the protection of a title, and without people beneath her to blame. Naomi returned to the Lantern Harbor Foundation the next day, not as a woman rescued by luck, but as someone beginning the work she had been preparing for her whole life without knowing it. Harbor Hand started small. At first, it was only a list of 5 restaurants willing to keep emergency meal cards behind the counter. The cards were simple, with no public label that could embarrass the person using them. A church, a shelter nurse, a bus driver, or a school counselor could request one. The meal would be served without questions, without a speech, without making hunger prove itself worthy. Naomi insisted on that. Hunger had already humiliated people enough. She built the program from memory as much as training. She remembered the mother counting coins under the table. She remembered the veteran turned away over a missing voucher. She remembered Adrian's hand trembling on a cold tile floor while strangers measured whether he deserved to be touched. She remembered all the people she had served at the Mariners' Table who were one bad week away from becoming invisible. Her first major policy was called the Warm Seat Rule. Any participating restaurant that accepted foundation funds had to agree that a person in crisis could sit inside safely while waiting for help, even if they could not order immediately. No one would be forced back into rain because discomfort was bad for business. No one would be treated like a threat for needing warmth. Some restaurant owners resisted. They worried about image, customer complaints, and liability. Naomi listened. Then she told them, calmly and without accusation, that a business afraid of being seen helping hungry people was not actually afraid of liability. Was afraid of being reminded what community means. A surprising number signed after that. The Mariners table became one of the first official partners. Harlan Cho did more than sign. He changed the restaurant. He installed transparent accounting for every donated meal. He created a staff emergency fund. He hired an outside manager with nonprofit experience. He raised wages modestly but meaningfully, because guilt without structural change is only emotion wearing a better suit. He also placed a small brass plaque near the entrance, not with Naomi's face or a dramatic version of the story, but with a simple line that said every person who entered hungry deserved to leave treated as human. Naomi did not ask for the plaque. At first, she did not even like it. She worried it made her one act of kindness seem exceptional when she believed it should have been ordinary. But Celeste told her that reminders were necessary because decency often disappears not from one grand act of evil, but from 100 small permissions to look away. Adrian slowly returned to himself, though not to the man he had been before tragedy. Some losses do not give back the original version of a person. They make something quieter, deeper, sometimes more compassionate, sometimes more fragile. He began volunteering with Harbor Hands, first behind the scenes, reviewing supply lists and helping design intake forms that did not shame people. Later, he trained with peer support counselors to work with people in grief, addiction recovery, and housing instability. He did not pretend his family name had saved him. In fact, he understood more clearly than anyone that it almost had not. Money had searched for him, but a waitress with $38 had reached him first. That truth changed him. His relationship with Celeste healed slowly. Mother and son had spent years separated by grief, guilt, and all the words each feared would injure the other. Naomi never intruded on that healing. She only noticed, over months, that Adrian stopped standing near exits during meetings. Celeste stopped looking at him as if he might vanish if she blinked. One afternoon, Naomi saw them walk together along the harbor after a fundraiser, not speaking much, simply sharing space. Sometimes that is what forgiveness looks like before it has language. At home, life changed too. The foundation helped Naomi and Lottie move from the drafty apartment on Anson Street into a small but bright unit near a park, with an elevator, reliable heat, and a window where Lottie could watch children chasing pigeons in the afternoon. The first night there, Lottie became agitated because the walls did not feel familiar. Naomi sat with her until the fear passed, describing each room softly, grounding her in the names of things. The next morning, Lottie woke and said the sunlight looked kind. Naomi cried in the kitchen where no one could see. For years, she had measured success and avoided disasters. Rent not late enough to evict. Medicine not empty enough to panic. Electricity not shut off yet. Shoes not broken beyond repair. Now she had space to imagine a life not built entirely around emergencies. She enrolled in evening courses toward a community health certification, not because she needed a title to prove her worth, but because the dream she had buried at 18 still had roots. The scholarship letter from long ago remained in her Bible, creased and yellowing. She did not look at it with grief anymore. She looked at it like evidence that the girl she had been was still somewhere inside the woman she had become, not lost, only waiting. Months passed, and Harbor Hands grew. What began with 5 restaurants became 15, then 28. A mobile meal van joined the program after hurricane season, exposed neighborhoods where older residents could not reach distribution sites. School counselors started calling when students came to class, hungry after weekends. Hospital social workers requested meal cards for discharged patients who had nowhere stable to go. Bus drivers carried small information cards because they were often the first to see who was sleeping where the city pretended not to look. Naomi worked harder than she ever had at the diner, but the work no longer shrank her. There is a difference between exhaustion that empties you and exhaustion that has meaning. She still had difficult days. She still dealt with budgets, skeptical donors, broken supply chains, and people who assumed compassion could be scheduled neatly between office hours. But she also saw men who had been ignored sit down to hot stew without being watched like criminals. She saw mothers receive grocery boxes before shame could force them to choose between pride and dinner. She saw restaurant workers begin to understand that dignity was not extra service, it was the meal. The story of Naomi's firing eventually reached local news, though Celeste did everything possible to keep it from turning into spectacle. Reporters wanted a clean headline: "Poor waitress saves rich heir. Villain manager exposed. Charity triumphs." But life is rarely that clean. Naomi agreed to one interview only after insisting that the focus remain on food insecurity and worker vulnerability, not on turning her into a saint. She was not a saint. She was a woman who had been tired, broke, and scared, and had still chosen to kneel. That distinction mattered. Saints are easy to admire because people imagine they are different from the rest of us. A tired woman choosing mercy with overdue bills in her pocket is much harder to ignore because she removes the excuse that kindness belongs only to people with spare time, spare money, or spotless lives. The interview aired on a Sunday evening. Naomi watched it with Lottie, who understood pieces of it. At one point, Lottie touched the screen when Naomi appeared, then looked at the real Naomi sitting beside her and smiled with sudden recognition. For one clear moment, the fog lifted enough for pride to pass through. Lottie remembered Naomi's mother then. She remembered the hospital. She remembered the little girl who used to line up dolls and pretend to check their temperatures. She remembered enough to tell Naomi, in her own wandering way, that her mother would have been proud. Naomi held that sentence for days. But the most important moment in Naomi's new life did not happen on television. It happened almost 1 year after the firing, on another rainy Tuesday afternoon, at the reopened Mariner's Table. The restaurant was hosting the launch of an expanded Harbor Hands partnership. There were donors, city officials, restaurant workers, shelter coordinators, and a few regular customers who remembered the old days with uncomfortable clarity. The event could have become polished and empty, the kind of gathering where people discuss hunger over catered trays. Naomi refused to let that happen. Instead of speeches first, she asked everyone to sit for a meal served family style. No VIP table, no reserved corner for donors, no separation between people with checks and people with lived experience. Adrian helped serve. Harlan cleared plates. Celeste sat beside a former shelter resident who now worked as a peer navigator. The room, once divided by fear and judgment, felt almost unfamiliar in its warmth. Near the end, Naomi stood where Kendra had once fired her. She did not describe Kendra with hatred. She did not need to. Hatred would have made Kendra too central to a story that had grown beyond her. Naomi spoke instead about the floor, the actual floor of the restaurant, the tile near table 6 where Adrian had collapsed. She said that every community has a floor like that, a place where someone falls and everyone else must decide what kind of person they are. Some step back, some record, some complain about the inconvenience, and sometimes one person kneels, not because they are fearless, but because they know what it feels like to need someone. She explained that Harbor Hands existed to make kneeling less lonely. It existed so mercy would not depend on one waitress risking her job or one stranger being connected to a powerful family. It existed because people should not have to be secretly important to be treated as worth saving. That line stayed with everyone. People should not have to be secretly important to be treated as worth saving. Adrian lowered his eyes when she said it. Celeste reached for his hand. Harlan looked toward the doorway, perhaps remembering all the people his restaurant had once allowed to be turned away. Isaiah, now promoted and studying hospitality management with foundation support, wiped his face quickly and pretended he had not. Marisol smiled openly, no longer afraid of being seen. After the event, when the room had emptied and rain softened the windows, Naomi stood for a moment by table 6. The tile had been repaired, where a crack once ran through it. Most people would never know anything had happened there. That seemed right to her. Sacred places do not always announce themselves. Sometimes they hide under ordinary tables in ordinary diners, waiting for ordinary people to make choices that echo farther than they can see. Naomi thought about the blue envelope that had slid under her door before dawn. For a long time, she had believed that envelope was the beginning of her rescue. Now she understood it differently. The rescue had begun earlier, on the floor, when she refused to let the room decide a man's value for her. The envelope had only carried the news that kindness, though delayed, had found its way back. And yet, she also knew kindness did not always return with a foundation job, a new apartment, or public vindication. Sometimes kindness returns quietly. Sometimes it returns years later, through a child who remembers being fed. Sometimes it returns only as the knowledge that you did not become cruel when cruelty would have been easier. That kind of return is harder to measure, but it is real. Naomi kept the blue envelope. She framed it in her office, not because of the address or the embossed lantern, but because of the sentence inside. Her act had not gone unseen. On difficult days, when funding was short or the need felt endless, she looked at that sentence and thought of all the unseen acts happening across the city. A cashier slipping a sandwich into a bag, a bus driver waiting an extra minute for an elderly passenger, a teacher sending food home without making a child explain, a nurse warming a blanket for someone no family had come to visit, a neighbor knocking on a door before the silence became permanent. The world is held together by people who do small mercies without witnesses. But Naomi also learned that mercy must become more than a moment. It must become policy. It must become systems. It must become wages, shelters, meal programs, honest records, and leaders who do not leave vulnerable workers at the mercy of petty tyrants. One good person can save a life. A good community can stop that life from falling so far in the first place. Years later, when people asked Naomi why she helped Adrian that day, they expected a dramatic answer. They expected her to say she sensed he was important, or that fate whispered to her, or that she had some grand vision of what would follow. She always disappointed them gently. She explained that she had no idea who he was. She did not see a foundation heir, a lost son, or a future partner in a citywide program. She saw a man on the floor. That was enough. And maybe that is the part of the story worth carrying with us. Not the envelope, not the money, not the downfall of a cruel manager, satisfying as justice may be. The heart of the story is the moment before reward exists, before witnesses understand, before the world claps, before anyone promises that goodness will be repaid. It is the moment when helping costs something. Naomi lost her job in that moment. She spent the last of her money in that moment. She was humiliated in that moment, but she kept something Kendra could never steal, even with false statements and forged records. She kept the kind of dignity that does not depend on a title. She kept the kind of courage that survives poverty, grief, and exhaustion. She kept the part of herself that still believed a stranger's life was worth bending down for. Kendra, in the end, lost everything she had tried to protect by refusing to bend. She protected the restaurant's image and destroyed her own. She guarded the cash drawer and exposed her theft. She treated compassion as weakness and discovered too late that compassion had witnesses stronger than fear. That is how justice sometimes works. Not always quickly, not always loudly, but with a patience that follows every hidden thing to its door. So the next time you see someone fall, maybe not on a restaurant floor, maybe not in a way anyone else can see, remember Naomi Reed. Remember the room that stepped back. Remember the woman who knelt. Remember that a person does not become worthy of kindness because they are secretly rich, secretly connected, or secretly important. They are worthy because they are human. And if you believe the world still needs people who choose mercy when no one is clapping, carry that belief into the next ordinary moment. Because somewhere, in a diner, on a bus, in a hospital hallway, under a leaking roof, someone is waiting to find out whether the room will turn away or whether one person will remember what humanity is supposed to look like. The woman in the faded raincoat counted her coins twice before placing them on the marble counter.
Are you sure you can afford anything in here?
To the two cashiers behind the counter, she looked like a problem that had walked in wearing cheap clothes.
She looks like she came in from the alley.
They made her wait, served customers who came after her, and gave her the oldest croissant in the display case. Eleanor took the paper bag without complaint and sat at the small table near the trash station.
Some people don't understand where they belong.
As she bit into the dry croissant, the company's slogan did not feel like a promise anymore.
So this is what warmth became.
Then she heard the cashiers talking.
Careless because they believed no one important was listening. People like that ruin the whole atmosphere.
They spoke of certain customers as if they were stains on the atmosphere.
We should put her on the list before she comes back.
They had created a quiet system for making certain customers feel unwelcome enough to stop returning.
The wrong people need a little push out the door.
Older man entered wearing a navy cap and holding a small wallet in both hands.
Not him again.
He counted coins, carefully apologizing with his posture before anyone even asked him to.
This is a bakery, not a coin machine.
And that was the moment the woman in the raincoat stopped chewing, because the people behind the counter had no idea who she really was. The woman in the faded raincoat counted her coins twice before placing them on the marble counter. Her sleeves were damp from the morning rain, her shoes were scuffed at the toes, and the paper grocery bag hanging from her wrist had a small tear near the bottom. To anyone kind, she might have looked tired. To anyone careful, she might have looked like someone who had been carrying more than groceries. But to the two cashiers behind the counter, she looked like a problem that had walked in wearing cheap clothes. They did not know her name. They did not know that the polished bakery around them, from the golden logo on the glass door to the elegant slogan painted across the wall, existed because of her. They did not know that the woman quietly asking for one plain croissant was Eleanor Vale, founder and chief executive of Hearth and Hollow Bakery, a 58-store chain built on the promise that no one should ever be made to feel too poor, too tired, or too ordinary to deserve warmth. They only saw what they wanted to see. A woman who would not tip well. A woman who would not photograph her coffee for social media. A woman who did not belong in the bright little world they believed the flagship store was supposed to represent. So they made her wait. They served 3 customers who came after her. They reminded her of the price before she had even finished ordering. And when she finally placed her coins on the counter, they gave her the oldest croissant in the display case, the one that should have been pulled from sale before sunrise. Eleanor took the paper bag without complaint and sat at the small table near the trash station. It was the table people chose only when every other seat was full, the one beneath the cold draft from the side door. Across the room, painted in cream-colored letters, above a row of polished wooden booths, were the words that had made Hearth and Hollow famous. Warmth belongs to everyone. Those words appeared on every cup, every napkin, every training video, every investor presentation. Customers took photographs beneath them. Managers repeated them at orientation. The marketing team had built entire campaigns around them. But that morning, as Eleanor bit into a dry, stale croissant in the corner of her own flagship bakery, the words did not feel like a promise. They felt like a witness. Then she heard the cashiers talking. At first, it was the usual careless cruelty people use when they think no one important is listening. They laughed about the old man who paid in coins. They mocked delivery riders who asked for water. They complained about nurses coming in after night shifts with tired faces and cheap shoes. They spoke of certain customers as if they were stains on the atmosphere, people who made the bakery look less refined, simply by sitting down. Then one of them mentioned a list. Not a company list, not an official policy. Something they had created themselves, a quiet system for making certain customers feel so unwelcome that they would stop returning. They called it the Velvet List because in their minds, Hearth and Hollow was supposed to feel soft, beautiful, and expensive, and some people, they believed, were not fit to touch velvet. Eleanor did not move. She kept her head lowered beneath the brim of her gray cap and held the croissant like any tired customer trying to disappear into the corner. But every sense in her body had sharpened. Years in boardrooms had taught her how to sit still while people revealed more than they meant to. She had heard lies dressed as strategy, cruelty dressed as standards, and theft dressed as efficiency. But what she heard next made her freeze. One of the cashiers said the night baker needed to be gone before Monday, because if Maya Reyes kept talking, the whole Sunrise Honey Bun story could fall apart. Maya Reyes. The name had appeared once in a report on Eleanor's desk, buried beneath phrases that had made the issue sound small. A difficult employee, a misunderstanding about credit, a resolved workplace conflict. At the time, Eleanor had almost trusted the summary. Almost. But now, sitting in disguise at a table no one respected, she understood something cold and simple. The reports reaching her office had not been telling the truth. They had been covering it. To understand why that moment mattered, you have to understand what Hearth and Hollow was before it became a brand. Before the 58 stores, before the soft lighting and seasonal pastries, before investors called it a premium community bakery concept. It began with a little girl and her mother standing outside a bakery window on a winter morning, looking at warm bread they could barely afford. Eleanor had been 8 years old then. Her mother had saved coins for 2 days to buy one sweet roll for her birthday. They were poor, but her mother wanted her to have 1 hour that felt special. They entered the bakery with wet shoes and shy smiles. The man behind the counter served them because their money was real enough to take, but he made it clear that they could not sit near the window. He placed them at the little table near the restroom, beside the mop bucket and the draft from the back door. Eleanor remembered the shame more than the taste of the pastry. She remembered her mother pretending not to care. She remembered other customers looking away. Most of all, she remembered realizing that a room could be warm for some people and cold for others, depending on who was allowed to feel welcome. Years later, when she opened the first Hearth and Hollow, she painted her promise on the wall before she even ordered the menu board. Warmth belongs to everyone. It was not branding then. It was not a slogan. It was a vow made to the child she had been, and to the mother who had swallowed humiliation so her daughter could have one birthday pastry. The first store was small and imperfect. The chairs did not match. The counter had scratches. The original tip jar was an old blue ceramic jar painted with a little lighthouse. Eleanor baked before sunrise, served coffee at noon, washed dishes after closing, and learned the names of customers most businesses would have overlooked. A retired bus driver, a mail carrier, a young nurse, a man who sometimes slept in his car, but still insisted on paying for black coffee. Eleanor learned early that a bakery could feed more than hunger. It could tell a person they were still welcome in the world. Then the little store became 3 stores, then 11, then 30, then 58. The logo became cleaner. The chairs matched. The menu became seasonal. The old wooden counter was replaced by stone. The first location was renovated into the company's flagship store, polished until it looked less like a neighborhood bakery and more like a photograph of one. From headquarters, everything looked beautiful. Revenue was up. Customer traffic was strong. The flagship store had become the crown jewel of the company. Social media showed golden pastries, smiling employees, and sunlight falling perfectly over cups of coffee. The regional manager, Victor Harlan, reported that the store was thriving. Victor was calm, polished, and precise, the kind of man who could make any problem sound like a minor adjustment already handled. So when Eleanor first saw the negative reviews and anonymous employee complaints, Victor dismissed them gently. He said growth always made some people uncomfortable. He said high standards could feel unfair to employees who resisted accountability. He said one night, Baker, Maya Reyes, had been especially emotional about ordinary product development decisions. He said the situation had been resolved through coaching. The phrase should have comforted Eleanor. Instead, it stayed with her. A few days later, an envelope arrived without a return address. Inside was a torn strip of apron cloth dusted with flour, a photocopy of a strange tip distribution sheet, and a scrap of parchment paper with one sentence written in blue ink. Ask who really bakes the sunrise buns. At the bottom was a tiny drawing of a lighthouse. Eleanor stared at that drawing longer than she expected to. It reminded her of the old blue tip jar from the first store, the one that had disappeared during renovation. Something about the envelope felt less like a complaint and more like a final attempt from someone who no longer trusted the official channels. So Eleanor stopped asking for reports. She went to see the truth herself. She bought the faded raincoat from a thrift store 2 neighborhoods away. She wore old shoes, a gray cap, and a delivery tote. She made herself look like someone the world was used to overlooking. Then, just after sunrise, she walked through the glass doors of her own flagship bakery as a stranger. The first thing she noticed was not open cruelty. It was performance. That made it worse. When a well-dressed couple entered ahead of her, Brielle Voss greeted them with a brightness so polished it seemed to sparkle. Brielle was the lead cashier, the face of the morning counter, beautiful in a sharp, curated way, with perfect hair and a smile that turned on instantly for the right kind of customer. Beside her, Kendra Pike laughed softly, offered samples, and made sure the couple knew about the limited edition glaze that had been trending online. Their warmth appeared instantly, like lights switched on for an audience. Then Eleanor stepped forward, and the lights went out. Brielle's eyes moved over the raincoat, the worn tote, the coins in Eleanor's hand. Something in her face hardened just enough for a person who had once been poor to recognize. Kendra became suddenly busy, wiping an already clean counter. The silence lasted just long enough to make Eleanor feel that asking for service was an inconvenience. That was how cruelty survived in places like this. Not always through shouting, not always through insults that could be quoted in a complaint. Sometimes it survived in pauses, glances, slow service, the wrong pastry, the cold seat near the trash, the tiny message that said a person could buy something but still not belong. Eleanor stayed after receiving her croissant. She listened, she watched, and the longer she stayed, the uglier the pattern became. An older man entered wearing a navy cap and holding a small wallet in both hands. His name was Samuel Brooks, though Eleanor did not know it yet. He ordered 1 sunrise honey bun and a small coffee. He counted coins carefully, apologizing with his posture even before anyone asked him to. Brielle's smile thinned. Kendra muttered that some people treated the register like a coin machine. The words were quiet enough to deny, but clear enough to wound. Samuel pretended not to hear. He looked once toward the table by the window, where morning light rested across the wood, then chose a seat closer to the back. Later, Eleanor would learn that Samuel had come to that same store every Friday morning with his wife, June, for 13 years. They had shared 1 honey bun and 2 coffees at the window table through retirement, illness, and the quiet narrowing of life. After June died, Samuel kept coming alone. Not because the bun was just a pastry, but because grief sometimes survives by repeating small acts of love. Brielle and Kendra did not know that, or worse, they did not care. To them, Samuel was simply another low-value customer, another name for the velvet list. Eleanor watched 2 nurses in wrinkled scrubs get told the restroom was for paying customers, even though they had already ordered. She watched a delivery rider wait, while customers who came after him were served first. She watched a construction worker quietly move away from the front seating area after Kendra made a comment about muddy boots, even though the floor was clean. None of these moments was dramatic enough to make the evening news, but together they formed a culture. A polished room where kindness flowed upward and contempt flowed down. Then the cashier spoke of Maya. Maya Reyes, they said, had become a problem. She kept asking about missing tips. She kept claiming ownership over recipes created on company time. She had become protective of a notebook. Victor had promised to handle her before Monday's national launch. Once Maya was gone, no one would be able to prove where the sunrise honey buns had really come from. Eleanor left without revealing herself. She did not confront Brielle. She did not comfort Samuel in the moment. She did not call Victor from the sidewalk. Powerful people who are warned too early start cleaning before the truth can be preserved. Instead, Eleanor walked 3 blocks in the rain, sat on a bench outside a closed florist, and called Miriam Chen, the company's head of internal audit. Miriam was not dramatic, not easily impressed, and not interested in protecting anyone's comfort from the facts. By the next morning, Eleanor Vale had become Edith Lane, a temporary support worker assigned to the flagship store. Victor approved the staffing request without concern. People like Edith Lane were invisible by design, useful hands, not dangerous eyes. Eleanor returned before dawn, when the bakery had not yet put on its performance. The front lights were dim. The music had not started. The pastry case was still empty. Without customers and curated warmth, the store revealed its bones, racks of trays, flour on the floor, taped labels, tired appliances, and the steady rhythm of people working before anyone was awake enough to thank them. That was where Eleanor truly met Maya Reyes. Maya was not what Victor's report had described. She was not unstable. She was not difficult. She was a woman in her 30s with dark hair tied back, flour on her forearms, and the focused calm of someone who had learned to keep moving because stopping would allow exhaustion to catch her. She worked with quiet attention, not only to the dough, but to the people around her. When Edith struggled with the labeling system, Maya helped her without making her feel foolish. She explained allergy tags, freezer notes, tray timing, and which boxes split if stacked too high. She also placed a warmer pair of gloves near Edith's station, pretending they had simply been left there. That small kindness almost hurt more than the insults had. Cruelty confirmed what Eleanor feared. Kindness showed her what was being wasted. Over the next hours, Eleanor watched Maya hold the store together from the shadows. Maya adjusted oven temperatures before a batch could burn. She corrected an inventory mistake that would have left the store short by Friday. She softened a citrus glaze that had been mixed too sharply. She prepared a low-sugar honey bun and set it aside with Samuel's name written neatly on the bag. She remembered that one nurse preferred oat milk, but no vanilla. She saved broken pastry ends for the delivery rider, who came in cold after the morning route. None of it showed on a dashboard. None of it appeared in Victor's reports. But without Maya, the flagship store would have been nothing more than expensive lighting around an empty heart. When Brielle and Kendra arrived for the day shift, the room changed. Brielle swept in wearing perfume and confidence, already complaining about flour near the proofing station. Kendra followed with coffee from another shop, which Eleanor noticed immediately because employees were supposed to drink Hearth and Hollow products while on shift. They walked through the bakery as if morning began when they entered, as if the trays, the notes, the warm buns, and the prepared counter had somehow created themselves. Maya handed over the production notes. Brielle barely looked at them. Kendra asked whether the honey buns were finally consistent, a question designed to sound professional while reminding everyone that Maya's work was always on trial. Maya explained that humidity had affected the dough and that she had adjusted the rest time. Later that morning, Eleanor heard Brielle repeat the same detail to Victor over the phone, as if it had been her own observation. Eleanor said nothing, but she remembered. As Edith, she worked several shifts over the next few days. She wiped tables, unpacked deliveries, sorted sleeves, and listened. She learned that the official tip policy and the real tip practice were not the same. On paper, tips were shared among eligible hourly employees based on hours worked. In practice, Brielle and Kendra controlled a second calculation. They called it front weighting. They claimed that the people who shaped the guest experience deserved more. By that, they meant themselves. Night bakers, dish staff, prep workers, and cleaners received whatever remained after the front counter took its invisible cut. Sometimes the theft was cash removed before counting. Sometimes it was digital tips assigned under the wrong shift category. Sometimes it was a handwritten adjustment justified by customer-facing performance. The amounts were small enough to hide in daily noise, but over 14 months, small theft had become real money. For Brielle and Kendra, it meant extra spending money. For the workers they stole from, it meant delayed bills, cheaper groceries, and bus fare counted twice. Maya had noticed. She had filed complaints, but every complaint disappeared into Victor's office and came back labeled as resolved through coaching. The family connection came from a careless sentence. One evening, Kendra complained that Victor always protected Brielle because of family dinners. Brielle snapped at her to be careful where she said things, then reminded her that Victor was not technically her father. The word technically did not erase the truth. Miriam confirmed it the next day. Victor Harlan was married to Brielle's mother. He had supervised Brielle's promotions, closed complaints against her, and never disclosed the conflict of interest. Now the pattern was clear. Brielle was not simply arrogant. She was protected. Kendra was not simply cruel. She was useful to someone protected. And Victor was not simply negligent. He had built a locked gate around the truth. Still, the most important evidence was the notebook. Maya kept it wrapped in parchment and hidden inside an old flour tin in the storage room. Eleanor first saw it when Kendra nearly found it during a closing shift. Papers slid across the floor, and Eleanor helped gather them before anyone else could look too closely. She saw dates, sketches, ingredient ratios, customer notes, and small drawings of lighthouses in the margins. She saw early versions of the Sunrise honey buns, notes about clover honey, oven temperature, texture, and how the glaze should catch the light without becoming sticky. She saw a sentence written beside one recipe. "Make it taste like morning is forgiving you." That sentence stayed with her. Miriam pulled Victor's national launch presentation that night. In it, Victor described the Sunrise honey bun as a signature expression of morning comfort, designed to make morning feel forgiving. The wording was too close to be coincidence, and the dates were worse. Maya's drafts came months before Victor's proposal. He had not stolen only a recipe. He had stolen the language of her heart. The launch was scheduled for Monday. Victor arrived at the flagship on Friday afternoon, wearing a navy coat, polished shoes, and the calm expression of a man visiting property rather than people. The staff changed around him. Brielle became brighter. Kendra became useful. The shift lid stood straighter. Even the store seemed to perform for him. Eleanor kept her head down and wiped tables. Victor praised the pastry case. He complimented Brielle on presentation. He talked about excellence, consistency, and protecting the Hearth and Hollow experience. Every phrase sounded reasonable until Eleanor looked at Maya standing near the back kitchen, listening to her own work being celebrated without her name. Then Victor turned to Maya. His voice stayed smooth, but the room understood smoothness could bruise. He mentioned concerns about attitude. He mentioned intellectual property boundaries. He mentioned the seriousness of keeping company product materials within approved systems. Maya tried to explain, but his authority silenced her before his words did. Brielle watched with satisfaction. Kendra looked relieved. The other employees looked down, not because they believed Victor, but because people who live paycheck to paycheck know the cost of eye contact. Victor announced that Maya would be placed on final review through the weekend, Her access to product development materials would be restricted. Her participation in Monday's launch preparation would be suspended. The official reason would be process compliance. The real reason stood naked in the room. They were taking her work, then punishing her for remembering it was hers. Maya did not cry. That seemed to irritate Brielle more than tears would have. Maya only asked whether she was still expected to complete the night bake before the review began. Even while being humiliated, she thought of the customers who would come in the morning. She thought of the people who had done nothing to her and still deserved something warm. That was when Eleanor understood something important. Maya was not just a talented employee. She was the keeper of the original promise. She was what Hearth and Hollow had been before it became polished enough for people like Victor to exploit. But knowing the truth was not enough. Eleanor needed proof strong enough to survive denials, lawyers, edited memories, and the polished outrage of guilty people caught too late. So she waited. She let Victor believe Monday would belong to him. She let Brielle believe Maya's ending had already been written. She let Kendra keep her little notebook beneath the register. And behind the scenes, Miriam's team gathered everything. They pulled digital tip records and compared them with cash deposits. They found adjustments clustered around Brielle's shifts. They found camera outages during tip counts. They recovered deleted scheduling messages. They traced 6 complaints from Maya, all closed by Victor's office. 1 complaint mentioned tip theft. 1 mentioned customer discrimination. 1 mentioned the Velvet List. 1 mentioned that Victor had used Maya's recipe language in a regional report. The final complaint contained almost the same sentence as the anonymous envelope. Ask who really bakes the sunrise buns. All 6 had been buried. Saturday brought the incident that removed any last hesitation. The bakery was busy, the kind of bright morning that made the store look like a commercial. Brielle and Kendra were in full performance for the customers they liked, offering samples and smiling beneath the slogan. Maya worked in the back, officially restricted from product development, but still responsible for keeping the pastry case full, because hypocrisy often depends on the labor of the people it punishes. Samuel came in later than usual, holding his navy cap and a folded photograph in his coat pocket. Eleanor later learned that it was his wedding anniversary. He had spent the morning at the cemetery visiting June. For 13 years, they had marked the day with a honey bun at the window table. He ordered 1 sunrise honey bun and a small coffee. His coins spilled slightly on the counter. Not many, just enough to slow him down. Kendra sighed. Brielle glanced toward the line behind him and suggested with cruel politeness that some customers might be more comfortable taking their orders to go when seating was limited. The window table was empty. Samuel looked at it, then looked down. Then Brielle did something Eleanor would never forget. She took a honey bun from the display, placed it in a bag, then switched it with 1 from a tray marked for disposal beneath the counter. The movement was quick. Most customers would not have seen it. Eleanor saw it. So did Maya. The bun was not unsafe. It was simply old, flattened, and unworthy of the price he paid. A small theft of dignity wrapped in branded paper. Maya crossed from the kitchen before caution could stop her. She did not accuse Brielle. She did not create a scene. She simply took a fresh bun from the warm tray, placed it in a new bag, and made sure Samuel received that one instead. For 1 brief second, the bakery became what it was supposed to be. Samuel held the warm bag in both hands. His eyes filled quietly, not with drama, but with the surprise of a person who had braced for humiliation and received gentleness instead. He sat at the window table and placed the worn photograph beside his coffee. In it, a younger Samuel and June smiled over a shared pastry. Maya returned to the back. Brielle's face hardened. The punishment came after the rush. Victor arrived within an hour, which told Eleanor he had been waiting for an excuse. The staff gathered near the back counter. Victor framed the issue as insubordination. He said Maya had interfered with front-of-house service, undermined chain of command, and created confusion during peak volume. Brielle added her version with practiced sadness. Kendra supported every word. Maya stood alone. That was the part Eleanor would remember. Not Victor's lies, not Brielle's cruelty, not Kendra's eagerness. It was the silence of the others. The baker who knew Maya had saved entire shifts. The dishwasher who knew tips had gone missing. The junior cashier who had once cried in the freezer after Brielle mocked her accent. They all knew pieces of the truth, but fear held them still. Eleanor did not judge them easily. She had been poor enough to understand fear. But she also knew that silence is the soil where people like Victor grow strong. Victor told Maya that her employment would be reviewed Monday morning before the launch meeting. Until then, she was to surrender any personal notes related to bakery products, because company policy required product development materials to remain accessible to management. Maya's face changed for the first time. Not panic exactly, but a flash of terror. The notebook, her recipes, her proof. Everything they had taken from her had at least left fingerprints inside those pages. If Victor got the notebook, the last living record of the truth could disappear. Eleanor created a small distraction by knocking over a stack of empty pastry sleeves near the storage door. It was clumsy enough to be believable from an older temp worker. Kendra snapped at her. Brielle rolled her eyes. Victor looked annoyed. For 30 seconds, the room's focus shifted. That was all Maya needed. She slipped into the storage room and came out moments later, with her expression too controlled and her apron pocket slightly heavier. As she passed Edith, her hand brushed Eleanor's sleeve, and something small moved from one pocket to another. Later, in the restroom, Eleanor unfolded the scrap Maya had given her. It was not the whole notebook. It was a single torn page, the first draft of the sunrise honey bun recipe, dated 11 months before Victor's proposal. At the bottom was the lighthouse. Beneath it was one sentence in blue ink. For the people who come in before the world has been kind to them. Eleanor stood in the restroom of her own flagship store, holding proof that the company's most celebrated new product had been born from the heart of a woman they were preparing to erase. By Sunday night, the trap was ready. Not a cruel trap. Eleanor did not believe cruelty could repair cruelty. She believed in truth arranged so carefully that lies had nowhere left to stand. Miriam had the audit files. Legal had the employment records. Human Resources had been instructed to attend Monday's launch meeting without informing Victor why. The board's ethics chair had been quietly briefed. Camera footage had been preserved from cloud backups Brielle thought had failed. The digital tip logs had been matched against deposits. Deleted scheduling messages had been recovered. The anonymous envelope, Maya's torn recipe page, and Victor's presentation were placed in one folder. Still, Eleanor needed one more thing. Maya's notebook had to be protected before Victor could take it. She found Maya after closing, sitting alone on an overturned crate near the dry storage shelves. The ovens had cooled. The bakery lights were low. Without music, customers, or performance, the room felt almost like the first Hearth and Hollow again, back when warmth came from work instead of design. Maya looked exhausted in a way sleep would not fix. Eleanor sat nearby, still wearing Edith's raincoat. For a while, neither of them spoke. Sometimes trust cannot be rushed with questions. Sometimes the most honest thing one person can give another is enough silence to decide whether the truth is safe. Maya eventually explained that she wrote everything down because memory was easy for powerful people to challenge. She wrote down dates because managers changed stories. She sketched lighthouses beside recipes that felt important because her daughter liked lighthouses. Maya had once told her daughter that a lighthouse was proof that even in darkness, someone could choose to keep a light burning for people they might never meet. That was why she had painted one on the tip jar. The tip jar had been her small attempt to make the team feel shared. Back when she still believed shared effort meant shared reward, she brought in an old blue ceramic jar and painted a lighthouse on it after her daughter went to bed. Across the front, she wrote, "For everyone who keeps the light on." For a few weeks, people smiled at it. Then Brielle taped a note over Maya's words, limiting tips to day staff only. No manager removed it. No one wanted conflict. Over time, the paper yellowed at the edges, and unfairness became part of the counter. Maya said she had stopped expecting anyone to fix it. That sentence hurt Eleanor because it named the deepest failure of leadership. Not that wrong had happened. Wrong always finds a way into human systems. The failure was that a good employee had stopped believing the truth had somewhere to go. Eleanor wanted to reveal herself then. She wanted to tell Maya that Monday would not unfold the way Victor expected. But revealing too early might put Maya in a position she had not chosen. So she asked only whether the notebook was safe. Maya looked at her for a long time. Maybe part of her sensed that Edith was not just a temp worker. Maybe she was too tired to name the possibility. But finally, she reached behind a flower bin and removed the wrapped notebook. She did not hand it over immediately. Her fingers tightened around it. Eleanor understood. That notebook was not just evidence. It was Maya's voice in a place that had tried to speak over her. It held late nights, failed batches, customer notes, her daughter's little drawings, and the proof that she had existed as more than labor. Eleanor promised, without revealing everything, that no one who had stolen from her would be allowed to keep deciding what the truth was worth. Maya studied her face. Then slowly, she let the notebook go. Eleanor took it with both hands. Monday morning arrived bright and cold. The flagship store opened early for the regional launch meeting. The pastry case gleamed. The sunrise honey buns sat in perfect rows, brushed with honey until they caught the light like small golden promises. A banner announced the national rollout. Victor had arranged everything carefully. Brielle wore her best smile. Kendra had curled her hair. Maya had been told to report before her review. To everyone in that room, Monday had a script. Victor would praise the launch. Brielle would be recognized for front-of-house excellence. Kendra would stand close enough to share the glow. Maya would be disciplined, possibly fired, and her notebook would disappear into management custody. The national campaign would move forward. The company would sell millions of buns under a story stolen from the woman who woke before dawn to bake them. That was the script they expected. Then Edith Lane walked in. Brielle frowned, irritated that the temp worker had appeared during a high-level meeting. Kendra whispered something under her breath. Victor began to explain that temporary support staff were not needed and that Edith could wait in the back. But Edith did not move to the back. She walked to the side of the room and placed the old blue ceramic tip jar on the table. The yellowed paper still clung to its front, the one that said, "Day staff only." Beneath the peeling edge, just visible, was the painted beam of a lighthouse. Maya went still. Brielle's smile vanished. Victor looked at the jar, then at Edith, and for the first time since Eleanor had met him, something unpolished flickered across his face. The front door opened again. Miriam Chen entered with 2 members of the audit team. Behind her came the head of human resources, company legal counsel, and the board's ethics chair. No one spoke loudly. They did not need to. Real authority has a different weight from performance. It does not have to decorate itself. Victor tried to recover. He greeted them with controlled surprise and began shaping an explanation before he even knew what had to be explained. Eleanor reached up and removed the gray scarf from her hair, then the cap, then the raincoat. For several seconds, the only sound in the flagship was the low hum of refrigeration behind the pastry case. The woman they had ignored, mocked, underpaid, and ordered out of the way was no longer Edith Lane. She was Eleanor Vale, founder and CEO of Hearth and Hollow Bakery. The name on the building, the face from the anniversary videos, the woman whose childhood promise had been printed on every cup in the store. And she had heard enough. She began not with anger, but with memory. She reminded the room that Hearth and Hollow had not been created to impress wealthy customers or polish itself into a brand too delicate for ordinary people. It had been created because once, a mother and daughter with very little money were made to feel unworthy of a warm table. Every cup, every bag, every training manual, every painted wall that carried the words, "Warmth belongs to everyone," existed because of that promise. Somewhere inside this flagship, the promise had been turned into decoration. No one interrupted. Victor's expression remained controlled, but the color had begun to drain from his face. Brielle looked toward the windows, as if calculating who might be watching. Kendra folded her arms too tightly, trying to become small after years of making others feel small. Maya stood near the back, still in her work apron, afraid to trust what was happening. Eleanor described what she had seen as Edith Lane, the stale croissant, the coins treated like contamination, Samuel being steered away from the window table, nurses, delivery riders, construction workers, and elderly customers being treated as though their presence lowered the value of the room. She did not exaggerate. Cruelty rarely needs embellishment when it is finally named plainly. Then Miriam placed the first folder on the table. It held customer complaints that had never reached the executive office. Some were formal, some were anonymous. Some were written by employees who had watched customers leave in shame. Each complaint had been softened, reworded, or closed before it could become a problem for the people causing the harm. The phrase repeated again and again, resolved through coaching. In this store, coaching had not meant correction, it had meant burial. The second folder held the tip records. Kendra began to tremble. The audit team had reconstructed 14 months of tip distribution across cash, digital payments, shift edits, and deposit logs. The numbers told a story no one could laugh away. Front counter staff had received far more than policy allowed. Night bakers, dish staff, prep workers, cleaners, and temporary support workers had been systematically underpaid. Cash counts had been changed during shifts where cameras went offline. Digital tips had been routed under categories that favored Brielle and Kendra. Eleanor explained that stealing from workers did not become less serious because it happened in small amounts. It became more shameful because it targeted people least able to absorb the loss. Maya looked down, not because she was ashamed, but because the truth of what had been taken from her had finally been measured. A number can prove what your body already knew. A number can show that you were not imagining the unfairness. A number can turn months of quiet insult into evidence. Victor tried to step in. He began shaping the issue as an administrative breakdown, a training gap, a lack of clarity around policy. The words came easily, dressed in professionalism. But Eleanor knew the language of escape. She opened the third folder. This one contained the complaint trail. 6 formal complaints from Maya Reyes, one about tip distribution, one about discriminatory service, one about a delivery worker refused water, one about the Velvet List, one about product ownership, one marked urgent, asking who really baked the sunrise buns. All 6 had been routed to Victor's office. All 6 had been closed before reaching Human Resources or the Ethics Board. Victor stopped speaking. There are moments when guilt becomes visible not through confession, but through the failure to keep pretending. His eyes moved once toward Brielle. It was a small mistake, but the room saw it. Eleanor revealed the undisclosed relationship next. Victor Harlan was married to Brielle's mother. He had supervised Brielle's promotions, closed complaints against her, approved disciplinary notes against employees who challenged her, and never disclosed the conflict. Nepotism might sound like an office rumor until the damage is placed beside it. Here, the damage had names: Maya, Samuel, the nurses, the delivery rider, the night bakers, the dish staff, the workers whose tips were shaved down while Brielle's authority grew. Brielle began to cry, but there is a difference between tears of remorse and tears of exposure. Remorse looks toward the people harmed. Exposure looks inward, toward what the guilty person is about to lose. Brielle's tears did not find Samuel. They did not find Maya. They turned back toward herself. Kendra tried to make herself smaller. She wanted the room to believe she had only followed Brielle, only repeated jokes, only done what the front counter culture demanded. Eleanor did not accept that. A person may not design a cruel system and still choose to enjoy it. Kendra had kept the Velvet List beneath the register. Kendra had used it. She had helped decide who received slow service, old pastries, cold eyes, and shame disguised as atmosphere. Then Miriam placed the small notebook from beneath the register beside the tip jar. The Velvet List looked harmless from the outside, with a little gold pattern on the cover. Inside were descriptions and labels for customers the cashiers had chosen to discourage: coin man, raincoat woman, scrub ghosts, delivery kid, bench sleeper, slow widow. There were notes about who tipped badly, who paid in change, who took too long, who lowered the look of the room, who should be told seats were limited even when they were not. Samuel had been listed too, not by name at first, but by description: old bus cap, window table, pennies, anniversary mornings. Maya covered her mouth. She knew what those mornings meant to Samuel. She knew because she had bothered to learn. Brielle and Kendra had known enough to use his tenderness against him. That was the difference between service and cruelty. Both notice details. One uses them to care. The other uses them to wound. Samuel had agreed to come in if needed, and Eleanor had made sure he would not be turned into a spectacle. He entered quietly, holding his navy cap. The room shifted with discomfort. People often prefer victims to remain abstract. Numbers can be reviewed. Complaints can be filed. But a person standing in front of you with hurt in his eyes removes the luxury of distance. Samuel did not accuse loudly. He was not built for public anger. His presence was testimony enough. Eleanor summarized what had happened to him with care. He had been a loyal customer since the early days. He had shared this store with his wife. After she passed, the window table helped him remember a part of his life grief had not taken. The cruelty done to him was not just bad service. It was the disrespect of a memory. Samuel placed the worn photograph of himself and June beside the tip jar. In the picture, they sat at the window table, smiling over a shared pastry. It was evidence of another kind, evidence that the people reduced to categories had lives, loves, rituals, and losses. Brielle could not look at him. Only after Samuel was offered the window table did Eleanor turn to the matter everyone had feared most. The sunrise honey buns. On the display table, beneath the tasteful launch sign, the pastries gleamed as if innocent of the theft surrounding them. They were beautiful. That was part of the pain. Maya's work was beautiful. Her care had survived even in the hands of people who wanted her erased. Victor had mistaken that beauty for a product he could own. Eleanor opened Maya's notebook. Maya inhaled sharply, but Eleanor looked toward her first, making it clear that the notebook was not being taken from her anymore. It was being recognized. The pages were shown to the room. Dates appeared, ingredient tests, failed versions, notes about humidity, glaze texture, customer memories, a sketch of a bun designed to catch light, the phrase about making morning feel forgiving, the lighthouse drawn beside the final version. Then Miriam displayed Victor's regional proposal, submitted months later using nearly identical language and product notes that followed Maya's development path almost exactly. Victor tried one final defense. He claimed that ideas developed within store operations belonged to the company. He implied that Maya misunderstood collaborative innovation. He suggested that leadership refined, scattered contributions into scalable products. It sounded intelligent until Eleanor placed one more document on the table. It was the employee innovation policy she herself had approved years earlier. The policy stated clearly that employees who created products selected for regional or national rollout were to receive formal credit, a development bonus, and internal royalty compensation were applicable. Eleanor had insisted on that policy because she knew creativity did not only live in corporate test kitchens. Sometimes it lived in tired people working odd hours, listening closely to customers no executive ever met. Victor had violated policy. More than that, he had violated trust. The room no longer belonged to him. It belonged, finally, to the truth. Eleanor then did what everyone had expected Victor to do to Maya. She began the review. But it was not Maya's employment being reviewed. It was the conduct of the people who had built a private kingdom inside a company that was supposed to serve everyone. Brielle Voss was terminated first. Eleanor stated the reasons clearly: discriminatory treatment of customers, retaliation against co-workers, manipulation of tip distribution, and participation in a hostile store culture that directly contradicted company values. Her quarterly bonus would be frozen pending legal review of stolen tips. The matter would be documented fully, not softened into personality conflict, not hidden behind coaching language, and not buried to protect the brand from embarrassment. Brielle looked stunned, as if she had never truly believed consequences were meant for people like her. She had mistaken favoritism for invincibility. Now the shield was gone, and all that remained was the record of what she had done when she thought no one powerful was watching. Kendra Pike was terminated next. Eleanor did not allow her lesser rank to become a hiding place. Kendra had kept the Velvet List, helped manipulate tips, participated in customer mistreatment, and turned cruelty into entertainment. Her fear in that moment could not erase the fear she had caused in others. Then Eleanor turned to Victor. The bakery seemed to hold its breath. Victor Harlan was terminated for cause, not asked to resign, not reassigned, not allowed to call it a mutual decision. Terminated. The reasons were placed into the record one by one. Undisclosed conflict of interest, retaliation against employees, suppression of formal complaints, falsification of internal summaries, failure to enforce tip policy, theft of employee-created product work, and conduct unbecoming of leadership. His innovation bonuses connected to Maya's recipes would be clawed back. His regional launch authority was revoked immediately. Legal counsel would determine further action based on the financial and intellectual property review. Victor did not rage. Rage would have been too honest. Instead, he looked offended, as if the greater injustice was that his Polish had failed to protect him. When security escorted him out, he passed the wall where the slogan was painted. Warmth belongs to everyone. For the first time, the words seemed to be looking back at him. But justice could not end with firing the guilty. Punishment stops the breaking from continuing. It does not repair what has already been broken. So Eleanor turned to the staff. This was the harder part. It would have been easy to treat everyone else as innocent because they had not been the loudest. It would have been easy to let the room applaud the fall of villains. But Eleanor had seen too much silence to leave it untouched. She told them that fear was real. She would not pretend childcare, medical bills, and survival did not shape the courage people felt able to show. But she also told them that a company becomes cruel not only when cruel people act, but when decent people decide that looking away is safer than standing beside someone being harmed. No one was fired for being afraid that morning, but no one was allowed to call fear a virtue. Hearth and Hollow would retrain the flagship from the ground up. The regional complaint process would be removed from manager control. Employees would receive direct access to an independent ethics channel. Tip distribution would become transparent on every paycheck. Digital records would be visible to eligible staff. Camera outages during cash handling would trigger automatic review. Undisclosed family reporting relationships would require immediate investigation. And every employee, from the front counter to the dish station to night production, would be treated as part of the guest experience, because the warmth customers feel in the morning often begins with someone unseen working in the dark. Then Eleanor faced Maya. For a moment, the founder of a 58-store company seemed less like a CEO and more like the little girl who once sat near a restroom with her mother, promising herself that someday she would build something kinder. She apologized, not with the easy apology of a public statement, but with the weight of a person taking responsibility for a system built in her name. She admitted that she had allowed reports to replace listening. She had allowed growth to create distance. She had believed the promise because she had written it, when she should have been checking whether others were living it. Maya did not know what to do with the apology. People who have been dismissed for too long sometimes struggle to receive recognition without bracing for the cost. Her eyes moved from Eleanor to the notebook, then to the honey buns in the case, then to the staff who had watched her be corrected, reduced, and nearly erased. Eleanor announced that the national rollout would continue, but it would be corrected. The Sunrise Honey Buns would launch under Maya Reyes's name. Every menu board, training document, product story, and marketing asset would identify her as the creator. She would receive the product development bonus she should have received months earlier, along with back compensation for the internal royalty period Victor had stolen. Her notebook would remain hers, with copies made only by consent and only for documenting authorship. And if Maya chose to continue developing products for Hearth and Hollow, it would be through a formal role with salary, schedule protection, and creative authority. Maya's hand went to the edge of the prep table as if the room had tilted. For so long, her work had been treated as something that could be taken because she needed the job too much to fight back. Now the same work was being named in front of everyone, not borrowed, not inspired by, not refined from a team concept, created by Maya Reyes. Eleanor offered her the position of Regional Product Development Lead for Community Bakery Innovation. It was a role designed not to remove Maya from the people who inspired her work, but to give her the power to bring their stories into the menu without letting anyone steal the credit again. Maya did not answer immediately. The silence was not rejection. It was the sound of a person trying to let dignity return to places where humiliation had been stored. Then Maya nodded. The room exhaled. It would be tempting to say everything changed in that instant. Stories often like clean turning points, but real healing is rarely so neat. The employees who had stayed silent did not become brave all at once. The customers who had been wounded did not magically forget. Maya did not walk out untouched by what had been done to her. Eleanor did not forgive herself simply because she had finally acted. Justice can open a door, but people still have to walk through, carrying the weight of what came before. Yet something real did change. Eleanor reached for the blue tip jar. She peeled away the yellowed paper Brielle had taped across it. The adhesive resisted at first, as if unfairness had become comfortable there. Then the paper tore free. Beneath it, the original words appeared in Maya's careful painted lettering. For everyone who keeps the light on. No one clapped. It would have felt too small, too theatrical. Instead, the staff stood in a silence that finally had respect inside it. Maya touched the jar with her fingertips. The lighthouse she had painted years earlier looked imperfect and beautiful, its beam stretching across the curve of the ceramic. She had made it after putting her daughter to bed, during a time when she still believed the store could become a shared place. That belief had been mocked, covered, and nearly broken. But it had not been erased. The repairs began that week. Every underpaid employee received corrected tip payments, covering 14 months, with interest. For some, it was a few $100s. For others, it was enough to catch up on rent, repair a car, pay a medical bill, or buy groceries without calculating every item twice. Eleanor personally signed the letters that accompanied the payments, though she knew a letter could not undo the insult of needing money that had been yours all along. The flagship closed for retraining, not for a cosmetic renovation, for a reckoning. The polished tables stayed. The pastry case stayed. The slogan stayed. But the meaning of the room changed because the people inside it were forced to face what they had allowed. Several employees apologized to Maya privately. Some apologies were awkward. Some were late. Some were more about guilt than repair. Maya accepted none too quickly. She had learned that kindness without change could become another performance. But over time, she allowed certain people to earn back small pieces of trust. The junior cashier who had once stayed silent began arriving early to help night staff transition into morning service. The dishwasher, who had feared losing hours, joined the new employee council. The shift lead who had let Brielle dominate the front counter stepped down from leadership until retraining was complete. Not everyone became noble, but some became honest, and honesty was a beginning. Samuel returned on the reopening morning. There were no cameras invited. Eleanor refused to turn his pain into a marketing campaign. No press release mentioned him. No staged photograph was posted. Maya baked the first tray herself, though her new role no longer required her to arrive before dawn. She said she wanted to make this batch with her own hands, not for the company, for the table by the window. When Samuel entered, he paused the way he always did. The room was different, though the furniture had not moved much. The difference was in the attention. No one rushed him. No one sighed at his coins. No one steered him away from sunlight. A fresh sunrise honey bun waited for him, not as charity, not as apology wrapped in pity, but as the restoration of ordinary respect. Maya had written his name on the bag in blue ink. Samuel sat at the window table and placed June's photograph beside his coffee. For a while, he simply looked at the pastry. Grief does not disappear because a bakery becomes kinder. A dead wife does not return because a table is saved. But cruelty had added an unnecessary wound to Samuel's mourning, and that wound, at least, could be tended. He broke the bun in half, as he used to do when June was alive. One half remained on the napkin across from him. Maya turned away for a moment, not because she wanted to hide from sadness, but because some forms of love are too private to stare at directly. Eleanor watched from a distance. She thought of her mother. She thought of that winter bakery. She thought of how easily a child's wound had become a company, and how easily a company had almost become the very thing that caused the wound. That was the danger of success. It could make people forget that every polished system began as someone's answer to pain. Maya's new work changed Hearth and Hollow slowly. She did not create products by chasing trends. She listened. She visited night crews, bus depots, hospital break rooms, laundromats, early morning markets, and stores where employees had spent years believing their ideas did not count. She asked workers what they ate when no one saw them. She asked widows what food reminded them of being loved. She asked parents what they bought when they had enough for only one treat. From those answers came pastries that did not feel invented by a committee. They felt remembered into being. The first menu under Maya's leadership kept the sunrise honey bun in its place, but now the menu card carried her name clearly. Created by Maya Reyes, some customers barely noticed. Employees noticed most of all. In break rooms across the region, bakers who had spent years believing ideas only counted when managers repeated them began writing things down. Dishwashers suggested waste-reducing fillings. Baristas proposed pairings based on regulars they knew by heart. Prep workers shared family breads. The company discovered that creativity had never been scarce. It had only been ignored. Eleanor changed, too. She stopped trusting beautiful reports without ugly questions. She visited stores without warning, not to frighten people, but to listen before language became polished. She created a monthly founders table where employees from any level could speak without regional managers in the room. She tied leadership bonuses not only to revenue, but to staff retention, complaint resolution quality, tip transparency, and customer dignity. Some executives resisted the changes quietly. They worried about cost, complexity, exposure, and risk. Eleanor reminded them that the greater risk had already walked through the flagship wearing a raincoat and carrying coins. A company that cannot survive honesty does not deserve protection from it. As for Victor, Brielle, and Kendra, their consequences continued beyond that Monday. Victor lost his innovation bonuses and his reputation for calm excellence. Once the stolen labor and borrowed language were removed, there was little left behind his polished vocabulary. Brielle learned that charm and family protection could open doors, but could not keep them open after trust was gone. Kendra learned that cruelty enjoyed in groups can still be accounted for individually. None of them were destroyed for entertainment. They were simply made to live in a world where the consequences they had given others finally reached them. That was poetic justice, not because it was dramatic, but because it was exact. They had made people feel unwelcome, and they lost their place in the company. They had stolen tips, and the money was taken back. Victor had erased Maya's name, and his own name was removed from the launch he had tried to claim. Brielle had covered the lighthouse on the tip jar, and now the whole company saw what she had tried to hide. Months later, on a cold morning much like the one that had first brought Eleanor's mother into that old bakery decades ago, the flagship store filled before sunrise. Not with influencers, not with investors, not with people chosen for how well they matched the brand. It filled with bus drivers, nurses, office workers, parents, delivery riders, retirees, students, and construction crews, warming their hands around paper cups. Some paid with cards, some paid with cash, some counted coins. No one behind the counter made them feel smaller for it. Maya stood near the pastry case, no longer hidden in the back unless she chose to be. Her daughter Lucia had come in before school, wearing a backpack nearly half her size. She pointed at the menu where her mother's name appeared beneath the sunrise honey bun. Children understand recognition more purely than adults do. To Lucia, those words meant her mother had made something beautiful, and the world had finally admitted it. Eleanor watched Maya lift her daughter so she could see the lighthouse tip jar on the counter. The original paint had been sealed to protect it, but its imperfections remained. The beam was uneven. The letters curved slightly. The blue glaze had a tiny chip near the base. No designer would have approved it as a national brand asset. That was why Eleanor loved it. It was not perfect. It was true. Samuel sat at the window table, his coffee steaming beside June's photograph. No one rushed him. No one treated his grief as an inconvenience. Sometimes Maya sat with him for a minute before her meetings. Sometimes they said very little. Warmth does not always need many words. Sometimes it is simply allowing someone to remain where love once found them. The slogan on the wall stayed the same. Warmth belongs to everyone. But after everything that happened, those words no longer felt like paint. They felt like a responsibility renewed each morning by the people who unlocked the doors, mixed the dough, wiped the tables, counted the tips, and chose how to see whoever walked in next. Because cruelty rarely enters a workplace wearing a monstrous face. Sometimes it wears a clean apron and a practiced smile. Sometimes it speaks in policy language. Sometimes it calls discrimination atmosphere, theft adjustment, retaliation coaching, and silence professionalism. And kindness, real kindness, is not proven by how warmly people treat someone powerful. Anyone can smile upward. Character is revealed in how people treat the tired woman with coins, the old man with a photograph, the night baker with flour on her sleeves, and the worker whose name is not printed anywhere yet. Eleanor learned that a company can lose its soul one small permission at a time, one ignored complaint, one stolen idea, one cruel joke, one old pastry handed to someone deemed unworthy of fresh bread, one manager who protects family instead of truth, one room full of people who see harm and decide silence is safer. But a soul can also be recovered. One honest act at a time, one complaint finally read, one notebook protected, one tip jar uncovered, one name restored, one table returned to a grieving man, one worker reminded that the light she kept burning in the dark was seen after all. Maya did not become important on the day Eleanor revealed the truth. She had always been important. Samuel did not become worthy when the CEO apologized. He had always been worthy. The night staff did not become part of the guest experience when policy finally recognized them. They had always been part of it. Justice did not create their value. Justice only forced the company to stop denying it. And maybe that is the lesson worth carrying beyond one bakery, one counter, one stolen recipe, or one hidden notebook. Kindness is not a slogan on a wall. It is not a polished logo, a seasonal campaign, or a sentence printed on a cup. Kindness is what remains when no one is filming, when the customer has no influence, when the employee has no protection, when the complaint would be easier to bury, and when doing the right thing costs more than saying the right thing. So the next time you stand in line and see someone being treated as if they do not belong, remember Samuel at the window table. Remember Maya in the night kitchen. Remember the old blue tip jar with the lighthouse painted on it. And remember that silence may feel safe in the moment, but it always helps someone build a darker room. If you believe every hardworking person deserves to be seen, leave a like and tell us in the comments. Would you have spoken up if you had been standing in that line?